Chapter 1346. Boom! The pitch-black storm suddenly expanded in the entire room, instantly shattering the floor and blowing away one furniture after another. The sudden violent impact startled Noah. After he reacted, he quickly shielded Letitia, who hadn't reacted yet, behind him, blocking the attack. This was no joke. The black wind before them was a power formed by the Black Death virus itself. Furthermore, with the support of Hamel's grimoire, which had been condensed into a ring, the Black Plague Demon King, who had completely transformed into the Black Plague Demon God of Death Spots, was no longer a simple virus. Instead, it was a gift that could bestow death upon individuals, causing them to instantly die. If Letitia were to come into contact with this black wind, she would most likely die instantly. At that moment, Noah stood in front of Letitia and endured all of the incoming black wind. Ugh! The berserk black wind directly battered Noah's body, causing his clothes to flutter wildly. It even caused Noah to involuntarily raise a hand to block in front of him. It was as if he was standing in the middle of a storm, stabilizing his footing with great difficulty. Under this kind of situation, the girl that appeared from the circular formation seemed to have lost her rationality as she furiously shouted while her body swelled with terrifying black wind. White Yiksha! Come out! Come out! You actually dared to make me, the Demon King, wear so many vulgar and shameless clothes. I definitely won't let you off. Hurry up and come out. Following the girl's enraged roar, the black wind that brought death became even more berserk. Rumble, under the assault of the berserk black wind, the entire shop gradually began to tremble. Against the berserk black wind, Noah did his best to open his eyes. However, when Noah saw the scene in the center of the black wind, he was immediately stunned. He saw that in the center of the berserk black wind, Pest was looking back and forth with a face full of fury, looking for a certain person. At the same time, her fluttering skirt fluttered with her movements. At this very moment, Letitia also had the same skirt. That's right. Just like Letitia. She was known as the Black Death Spot Demon King. She had the merit of leading 80 million undead and possessed the qualifications to become a god. She had transformed into a true Grim Reaper. Almost a month ago, she had brought terror to the entire 4 million outer disciples of the Northern District. The black and white patterned dress she was wearing had long since disappeared. It was replaced by a blue and white maid uniform. That was right. It was a maid's uniform. That was why she was the same as Letitia. What did White Yiksha do to that spotted loli to make her so angry? In fact, there was no need to guess the reason. Judging from Pest's furious shout, before Noah came to take back this spotty loli, this lass must have been taken advantage of and bullied by that perverted social class leader. The only thing missing was training her, right? No wonder that White Yiksha ran away so quickly, Letitia said while hiding behind Noah, feeling somewhat vexed and uncomfortable. In short, Master, please first stop the Black Death Spot Demon King from going berserk. Otherwise, if this continues, this shop will be finished. After all, Pest's power was not destruction. Instead, she directly bestowed death upon an individual and forced them to die instantly. Thus, she did not possess much destructive power. However, even if she did not possess any destructive power, just by exploding her power to the limit, the violent wind created would be enough to blow this shop away, right? No matter what, White Yiksha had helped them so much. If they allowed this servant to go berserk, even if there was a reason for it, Noah would still lose all face, right? To Letitia, this was something that she could not tolerate. How can my master be criticized because of such a thing? Letitia shouted loudly. That's why, Master, you should first stop that idiot from going berserk. Hearing this, Noah could not help but want to smile bitterly. However, he endured it, took a deep breath, and shouted loudly. Why are you still not stopping? The ring on Noah's finger flickered with a faint radiance. The storm-like wind of death that was wreaking havoc in the surroundings suddenly stopped. Pest, who was in the center of the black storm, seemed to have been forcibly immobilized. Her entire body froze in place, unable to move in the slightest. Then, the black wind that pervaded the surroundings slowly disappeared. Of course, this was not what Pest wished for. Like Letitia, this former demon king who controlled the Black Death was now completely subordinate to Noah. She had established a subordinate relationship with Noah. This kind of relationship was not merely a verbal one. Instead, it was in the form of a contract. If such a contract was made by someone weaker than the one being controlled, then it would be fine, but if the power of the one being controlled was greater than the one being controlled, then the power of the contract would be brought to the extreme. Simply put, it was equivalent to the absolute control of the heroic spirits from the Holy Grail War in the world of the moon. Thus, under the restriction of the contract, Pest, who had become Noah's subordinate, was unable to disobey Noah's orders. Understanding this, even though Pest was still unable to move, she turned her furious gaze toward Noah. Her eyes were so furious that it seemed as if they were going to shoot out flames. Toward this, Noah heaved a sigh of relief. He looked at Pest with an annoyed expression. Yo, former Lord Demon King, it's truly been a long time. If possible, I do not wish to see you at all. Pest did not conceal the malice in her words at all. When I think of how I will be humiliated like this by you all in the future, and also become your subordinate, there is truly nothing worse than this. First of all, I have to remind you that the ones who play the domineering game as the Demon King are always people like you who don't care about the safety of others. Since that's the case, then you should be mentally prepared that one day you will be suppressed by the box court and become someone else's subordinate. Noah corrected him. Secondly, I've never had the hobby of humiliating captives. Don't confuse me with White Yiksha. Bye. Night. F***ck. Extreme anger once again appeared on Pest's delicate and pretty face. Where is that abominable fellow? Tell her to come out. So what if I come out? Noah said bluntly. If he really wants to fight with you, you won't even be able to withstand his pinch. Pest immediately glared furiously at Noah. However, she knew that this was the truth. Not to mention that White Yiksha was one of the top existences in the box court. In terms of sun sovereignty alone, the White Yiksha held 14 of them. Each of them could summon a corresponding star beast. Those were existences capable of rivaling the three great strongest races. With Pest's strength, even if she transformed into the Black Deathspot Reaper and became a god, it would still be impossible for her to defeat even one of them. Not to mention 14 of them. Thus, even though it was very cruel, the reality was that it was simply impossible for Pest to do anything to White Yiksha. Not to mention Pest, even Noah did not dare to say that he had a way to deal with White Yiksha. Even though Pest understood this, she did not seem like the type to consider things rationally. Sure enough, you are not a good person either, Pest said in a mocking manner. I've heard that the leader of your community seems to be more suited to use me. Yet, in the end, you still ended up occupying my authority. It would appear that you are indeed a selfish person. Those words caused Noah's eyes to narrow. Undoubtedly, Pest knew that Noah did not know about Benevolence's grace at all. Nor did he know about the details of this matter. In the end, Pest still said those words. Clearly, she only wanted to make things difficult for Noah. This caused Letitia to feel somewhat furious. She wanted to step forward but was stopped by Noah. Under Pest's attentive gaze, Noah slowly stepped forward and arrived before Pest. He extended a hand and, to Pest's stunned expression, bent down and lifted her delicate chin, raising her face slightly to face him. There's nothing I can do about it. After all, I said that I would properly make you my toy, Noah said with a smile that was not a smile. Are you prepared to accept it? Because of that, a strong sense of foreboding emerged in Pest's heart. Chapter 1347. The next day, in front of No Name's headquarters, Ren, 16 Knights, Joyu and Asuka, Haruhabu Yai-Chi, and Black Rabbit were all present. They were preparing to head to the Southern District to participate in the Harvest Festival. In addition to the main force members who were preparing to head to the Southern District for the Harvest Festival, the children in the community were all present, led by Lily. It was very clear that they were planning to send off the main force members heading to the Southern District to participate in the Harvest Festival. Ren cast his gaze toward Noah, who was standing at the very front of the group of children. He spoke with a somewhat apologetic yet serious tone. In that case, Noah-san, I'll leave the headquarters to you for the time being. Please, 16 Knights of Reverse said casually without any sincerity. We will return with trophies that will satisfy you. If we're in a good mood, we might even bring you a gift, Joyu and Asuka said with a mischievous smile. That's why, you have to work hard. Same here, Haruhibu Yaichi nodded with the most serious expression as he hugged Sanmao. I'll remember to bring you the specialties of the Southern District. Everyone, we are preparing to participate in the Harvest Festival's bestowment game, not to go sightseeing. Black Rabbit's long rabbit ears drooped down as he spoke in an extremely helpless manner. Why can't everyone be a bit more nervous? Well, isn't it good to have confidence? Noah curled his lips. Since you're so confident, I hope that you'll truly be able to show me the trophies you'll bring back that will leave me speechless. Please look forward to it, little brother. The corners of 16 Knights Reversal's mouth curled up slightly as he looked behind Noah with a meaningful gaze. Besides, even if you're going to stay behind, I believe that little bro will definitely not be bored, right? Hearing 16 Knights' words, Joyu and Asuka, Haruhibu Yaichi, Black Rabbit and Ren's expressions immediately became strange. They all cast their gazes behind Noah. There, Pest appeared to be dispirited and extremely tired. She stood there as if she was feeling extremely humiliated and had given up on herself. Upon closer inspection, Pest was not wearing her iconic floral pattern dress, nor was she wearing the black and white maid uniform she wore yesterday. Instead, she was wearing a set of apparel that made one unable to look at her directly. It was a tight-fitting outfit made of soft fur. Although it was called a bodysuit, in fact, the style of the bodysuit was no different from a swimsuit. Not only did it expose the shoulders, abdomen, and thighs, but it also almost exposed the entire white back. As for the color, it was the color of brown. Furthermore, it had a pair of dog ears on its head. Its hands and feet were also equipped with dog gloves and gauntlets. There was also a furry tail hanging from its back. That figure was simply a typical example of a doting mother dog. What's more, there was a leather collar around the neck of such a lovable dog. There was a rope tied to the collar, and Letitia was holding it firmly in her hand. This scene made 16 Knights' eyes light up. He patted Noah's shoulder happily. Not bad. Little brother, you've also finally awakened? Don't speak as if I have some sort of terrible potential, alright? Noah swatted away 16 Knights' enthusiastic hand and said with a fake smile. It's just that my maid doesn't seem to be very obedient. Thus, I must properly educate her and have White Yiksha provide me with some assistance. Noah's words caused Pest, who was dressed like a dog, to shiver all over. As if she had recalled some sort of nightmare, she muttered with a face full of humiliation and fear. Demon. Demon. All of you are demons, even the heavens would pity her. Until yesterday, Pest was still incomparably domineering and filled with killing intent. She had the appearance of wanting to chop Noah and White Yiksha into pieces. Yet, today, she had become like this. One could very well imagine what sort of devastation Noah and White Yiksha had inflicted on Pest in the short span of a day. Looking at Letitia's joyful appearance as she held onto the leash, it was clear that this vampire maid had also hit Pest while he was down. She was having a lot of fun. Although the pitiful Pest appeared to be extremely cruel and calm, and was still a former demon king, in reality, before she became an undead, this girl was merely a 12-year-old child. Noah, White Yiksha, and Letitia did not have the slightest bit of guilt when they ravaged the flowers of their motherland. Ren could not bear to look straight at them. As for Jiu Fei Niao and Haruibu Yao, they looked at each other. As if they had made some sort of decision, they nodded heavily. I didn't expect that a dog's outfit could be so cute. The South District's Harvest Festival seems to be going on for nearly a month. I wonder if I can buy a rabbit girl outfit during the festival? At this moment, a chill ran down Black Rabbit's spine, causing this rabbit to almost jump up and speak with a panicked expression. 2. Who do you two plan to buy the rabbit girl outfit for? Jiao Fei Miao and Heroi Buyao looked at Black Rabbit at the same time. They did not say anything and only gave Black Rabbit an incomparably brilliant smile. This smile caused Black Rabbit to finally be unable to hold back and cry out noisily. You! What do you plan to do? This group of idiot adults. Good. 16 Knights clapped his hands and looked at Jiao Fei Miao and Heroi Buyao with a serious expression. Let me participate as well. Welcome, welcome. Jiao Fei Miao and Heroi Buyao nodded enthusiastically. Stop right there. You big idiot adults. Black Rabbit could not bear it anymore and took out a paper fan used to ridicule, randomly fanning the 3 problem children. The 3 problem children dodged Black Rabbit's paper fan attack while laughing loudly. It was as if they were deliberately teasing Black Rabbit as they ran into the distance. Black Rabbit was so angry that he trembled and shouted as he chased after them. Wait! Wait for me! Ren was dumbstruck as he looked at his 4 companions who were running further and further away. When he finally reacted, he ran forward in a panic. He still remembered that during the last fire dragon birth ceremony, Ren was abandoned by the crowd halfway through the ceremony. This time, Ren did not want to be left behind again. At that moment, Ren hurriedly chased after him while turning his head and shouting at Noah. Then, Mr. Noah, we'll be leaving now. After saying that, the group of people ran away without leaving a trace. Seeing this, Noah smiled helplessly. This group of people, we haven't even arrived at the location of the ceremony and they're already causing such a ruckus. I really don't know what will happen during the ceremony. Isn't it good? Letitia held the dog leash and said with a gentle expression. No matter if it's Ren or Black Rabbit, in order to support this community, they've suffered a lot. It's quite rare to be able to laugh and talk like this. Don't say it like you don't have a part in it. Noah knocked on Letitia's head. Why do you say it like an old person? Oh, this is truly rude of me. Master. Letitia held her head that was knocked on and said in a slightly awkward manner. Although I have this appearance now, I was once a pure-blooded vampire that wreaked havoc in the Box Court as the Demon King. Furthermore, I was also a founding member of this community. No matter what, I should still be able to express my feelings toward the lives of the younger generation, right? I was once a Demon King too. Pest was unable to refrain herself from interrupting. Why have I never seen you all respect me before? You said it yourself. That was in the past. Letitia pulled on the leash in her hand and said. Now, before you became a Demon King, you were still Master's servant. Before you have a sufficient understanding of your current identity, as your senior, I have many things that I need to properly teach you. After saying those words, a joyous smile appeared on Letitia's young and delicate face. This caused Pest's face to turn green. Seeing Pest's appearance as if she was facing a great enemy, Noah was unable to refrain himself from having the urge to bully this little girl. Thus, just like yesterday, Noah bent down and lifted Pest's chin to face him. He revealed a mischievous expression. Rest assured, I will treat you well, my adorable toy. Pest immediately started shivering. Tears welled up in the corners of her eyes. After a long while, the sorrowful cry of the spotted lowly resounded through the sky above the base. I never want to wear those shameful and vulgar clothes again. Chapter 1348. In the dark night, the gentle moonlight slowly sprinkled down from the sky like a layer of hazy gauze, enveloping the entire earth. The night sky of the Box Court was indeed very beautiful. The stars were like decorations in the dark night sky. While they flickered, they became a small part of the stars, forming a beautiful scene that seemed to be pierced through by various galaxies. Such a scene could only appear in the Box Court. Because only in this box where even the ownership of the stars, the so-called sovereignty, was occupied by various Asuras, gods, and Buddhas, would these stars naturally shine brightly in the sky. Of course, if the Asura gods and Buddhas who held the sovereignty of these stars did not wish for the stars to be seen by the entire Box Court, then they could make them descend from the sky at any time. Although it sounded very inconceivable, the so-called sovereignty was such a thing. Not only could the holder summon the corresponding star spirits and star beasts of those stars, even gods and giant dragons, but they could also control their trajectories and make the stars move according to their will. Of course, these stars that decorated the bustling starry sky were only secondary. If the sovereignty of the sun was completely held by one person, then that person could also change the trajectory of the sun according to their will. Unfortunately, even the star spirit of the sun, White Yiksha, who was once a two-digit demon king, only held the sovereignty of 14 suns, let alone other people. If one wanted to hold the sovereignty of all 24 suns, including the Ophiuchus constellation that was awarded to Letitia as a reward for the merits of the box court knight, there was a total of 25 suns. The difficulty was almost equal to impossible. Under such circumstances, at the edge of a cliff that was covered by moonlight, a youth looked up at the stars in the sky and muttered, "I wonder, including the sun, how would it feel to hold the sovereignty of all the stars in one's hands?" The young man who said such wishful thinking was probably only 11 or 12 years old, right? The young man was wearing what seemed to be a long robe of the same color on top of a pure white training suit. The color of the youth's hair was a deeper white than the pure white clothes. In addition, the youth also had a pair of golden eyes that emitted light. That attitude actually made the young man look more mature. However, compared to that mature feeling, the youth's words made people think of words like, "Children's words carry no harm." Why don't we take the sovereignty of all the stars, including the sun, as our goal? In the next second, this sentence was immediately greeted by a clear voice filled with helplessness. "Your Highness, it's good that you have such ambition, but even I have to say that it's simply impossible to achieve it, isn't it?" As soon as he finished speaking, a petite figure suddenly appeared behind the young man who was addressed as His Highness. It was a young girl with waist-length black hair. The young girl's age was about the same as the young man who was addressed as His Highness. She wore a sleeveless black dress with a jacket tied around her waist. Outside the jacket, there was a belt around her waist. There were several short knives hanging from the belt. Of course, compared to the weapons that were originally bestowed in various myths and legends, the quality of these short knives was terrifyingly low. They were only ordinary short knives. However, just by carrying a few ordinary short knives, the young girl gave people a feeling that she was not to be underestimated. It was believed that if anyone looked down on the young girl because of her lovable appearance and ordinary weapons, they would definitely die miserably. The young girl said helplessly as she approached the young man who was addressed as His Highness, "Your Highness, please don't forget that you only have the most important sovereignty of the sun. If you want to obtain all 25 of them, it's already difficult to make people dizzy, let alone the sovereignty of all the other stars." "Is it Ling?" His Highness did not seem to be surprised by the young girl's sudden arrival at all. He did not even turn his head as he spoke. "I know it's difficult, but it's because it's more difficult that it's easier for people to feel a sense of accomplishment when they complete it, isn't that right?" "That's not wrong, but there should be a limit, right?" The young girl named Ling pouted. "Although I know that Your Highness is very amazing, there are also many amazing people in the box court. So many Asuras, gods, and Buddhas, but none of them can achieve such a great feat even if it's Your Highness. I think it's impossible." "I know, that's why I'm just saying it casually. Obtaining the sovereignty of the sun is already troublesome enough for me, but now there's only one. If I want to obtain the sovereignty of all the stars in the sky, then no matter what, I won't do such an impossible thing." His Highness shook his head with a smile. "It's just that, since I don't have anything in particular that I want to do, I might as well make this a goal. That's why I said that." "Don't have anything in particular that you want to do?" Ling was silent for a moment before suddenly speaking. "But, Your Highness, right now, we have something that we must do." "I know," His Highness said with a calm expression. "Is everything ready?" "Basically, everything is ready," Ling said. "Then, Your Highness, is it time to carry out the attack plan in the Southern District?" "The Southern District?" His Highness narrowed his eyes and abruptly asked this question. "This time, we should be preparing to attack the Eastern, Southern, and Northern Districts at the same time, right?" "Why don't you just let me attack the Eastern District?" "No, Your Highness." Ling reminded. You are a very important leader for us, and there is a very terrifying existence in the Eastern District. If you go against her, even your highness can't say that you won't be in danger, right? That's right, the Demon King of White Night is indeed a very terrifying existence, even I can't compete with her. His Highness calmly accepted. But, it's because I know it's very difficult that I want to challenge it. Your Highness, please don't be silly. Ling puffed up her cheeks. Undoubtedly, she just escaped from the Eastern District last time. Hearing this, His Highness slightly narrowed his eyes. I heard that No Name also went to the Southern District's Harvest Festival, right? Yes, and he has already set off. Ling seemed to have seen through what His Highness really wanted to ask and directly answered. As for that little brother, he seems to have chosen to stay in the base and didn't go to the Southern District. Stay in the base? His Highness immediately touched his chin. In other words, he is also in the Eastern District, right? That's right. Ling sighed. The White Night King is already dangerous enough, and now that little brother is also in the Eastern District, the Eastern District is undoubtedly the most dangerous area. Fortunately, those monsters are assisting the attack. Speaking of this, Ling's pretty face, which had always appeared very innocent, actually showed a trace of fear. With the attack of those monsters, even if the White Night King can protect himself, he can't protect the entire Eastern District, right? His Highness' expression suddenly became a little solemn, and he muttered. Then, what about that person? That little brother? Ling asked with some confusion. Your Highness, why do you look like you care about that little brother? I don't understand myself. His Highness closed his eyes. It's just that I feel that that person has something that I don't have. Something that your Highness doesn't have? Ling asked curiously. What is it? His Highness didn't speak, but asked this question. Since we can't go to the Eastern District, can we lure that person out of the Eastern District? Lure out the Eastern District? Ling suddenly frowned, and then she thought of something and smiled sweetly. No, there's no need to lure that little brother out, he will come out on his own. Come out on his own? His Highness was stunned. Your Highness, Ling said. Let's not go to the Southern District, let's go to the Northern District. Chapter 1349. Early in the morning, Noah was leisurely drinking tea in the meeting room of No Name's headquarters. Pest, who was wearing a blue and white maid uniform, had an emotionless expression on her face as she mechanically placed the black tea on the tray in her hand before Noah. Master, please have some tea. After 2 days of flirting, teaching, Pest finally submitted to Noah in a sullen manner. She obediently addressed Noah as her master and was entrusted by Letitia to serve Noah. If one were to say that she was unwilling, then that was not the case at all. Although she still held on to her pride as a former demon king, Pest was not someone who was unable to accept the fact that she had to serve someone else. After all, before she was infected by the Black Death and died from the corrosion of the Black Death, Pest was merely an ordinary child. No, it would be more accurate to say that the term ordinary child was not quite right for Pest to be used on her. That was because Pest did not lead a very good life when she was alive. Because of that, Pest did not have any objections toward the matter of work. Otherwise, Pest would likely have to stubbornly resist for another 1 or 2 days. Because of that, Pest did not feel any reluctance toward the matter of who she was supposed to serve tea for. If there was anything that she was unwilling about, it would be the fact that the person who was supposed to enjoy the tea Pest had brewed for the first time was Noah. Of course, Pest would definitely not mention this matter to anyone. Otherwise, the miserable experience from 2 days ago and yesterday would definitely befall Pest again. When she recalled the terrifying experience of being repeatedly put on all kinds of unsightly clothes like an irresistible rag doll and being groped all over by a pervert like White Yiksha, Pest's expression became incomparably stiff. Noah didn't notice this, or rather, he noticed it but didn't say anything. He nodded his head indifferently. As he looked out the window, he reached out his hand and picked up the teacup. However, he didn't drink it. He just looked outside absent-mindedly. No one knew what he was thinking. Letitia, who was standing behind Noah with Pest on his left and right, tilted her head and asked, "Master, what are you thinking about?" Noah didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a sip of black tea. After pondering for a while, he spat out some uncertain words. "Do you guys feel that the atmosphere around you seems to be a bit off recently?" "Atmosphere?" Letitia was a little startled. "Atmosphere?" Pest also furrowed her brows. The two girls, who had once been demon kings and had struck fear into the hearts of all the residents in the courtyard, couldn't help but look at each other. Then, Letitia confirmed it. "Master, we don't quite understand what you mean," Letitia said softly. "What exactly is wrong? Can you be specific?" Noah's brows furrowed tightly. After hesitating for a while, he sighed and said directly, "For example, do you guys feel that something big might be happening soon?" "Something big?" Letitia and Pest were both startled. However, this was the reason why Noah had an indifferent look on his face. For some unknown reason, after Letitia, Pest, and Aster helped him get up in the morning, Noah felt a little uneasy. Yes. There was no reason for him to feel uneasy. This wasn't the first time Noah encountered such a situation. Every time something big was about to happen, Noah's sharp intuition would remind him like a sixth sense, causing Noah to feel uneasy. For example, during the battle on Celestial Wolf Island, before he encountered the black dragon recorded in Revelation, Noah also felt uneasy for no reason. Now, Noah had this feeling again. This caused Noah to be on guard. It couldn't be helped. As it turned out, Noah's intuition was indeed very sharp. This was especially true when something big was about to happen. It was like a warning, causing Noah's mind to be unable to calm down. Letitia and Pest, who didn't know about this, could only look at each other in dismay. "I say," Pest couldn't help but mock Letitia. "Could it be that you're being overly sensitive?" Seeing Pest's impudent appearance, Letitia immediately cast a sharp gaze at her. This caused Pest's expression to stiffen again. She tightly shut her mouth. If one were to say who Pest was most afraid of, then it would undoubtedly be Letitia. That was because only by establishing a subordinate contract with Pest would Noah, as Pest's master, be able to make Pest unable to resist. Noah would be able to toy with her like a toy. Every time Noah wanted to properly dampen Pest's spirit, it would always be Letitia who carried out his orders. Thus, in the past 2 days, Pest had been tormented by Letitia quite a bit. She was even afraid of being tormented by Letitia. In terms of strength, Pest was, without a doubt, in the lead. Furthermore, she was more than a step ahead. After being modified and condensed by Thousand Eyes, Hamel's magic book that took the form of a ring did not change its effect on Pest. However, its form had changed. Before this, if Pest wanted to transform into the Black Death Spot Reaper and become a god, she would have to activate the power of Hamel's magic book. However, after being modified and condensed by Thousand Eyes, Hamel's magic book was no longer activated by Pest. Instead, it would be worn by Noah, Pest's master. In other words, when Noah wore the ring, Hamel's magic book would activate and allow Pest to transform into a god. On the other hand, once Noah removed the ring, not only would Pest be unable to maintain her physical body, she would also return to the ring. The effect of Hamel's magic book would also disappear. Pest would return to her original form and become a pure, undead spirit. Thus, unless Noah abandoned the subordinate contract between him and Pest, Pest would have to become even stronger than Noah in order to resist Noah. Otherwise, she would not be able to resist Noah no matter what. However, in a situation where she did not resist Noah, Pest would be able to maintain her god form at all times and unleash the might of a 5-digit peak demon king. Letitia was once a ruler with full authority. She was granted sovereignty over the sun of Ophiuchus constellation and a 4-digit status. Without a doubt, she was stronger than Pest. Unfortunately, Letitia had already lost her divinity and her strength was less than 10%. Even her gift was incomplete. Right now, her strength was probably only at the 5-digit level. She was definitely not a match for Pest. However, in terms of status, Letitia was undoubtedly higher than Pest. There was no other reason. Letitia was simply more favored than Pest. She was favored by her master, Noah. If she resisted Letitia, Noah would definitely make an appearance for Letitia. At that time, Pest would be in trouble. As expected, if she wanted to suppress this pure-blooded vampire, she would have to fight for her master's favor. Although she was unwilling to admit it, this was the truth. No, that's not the only way. Although I've formed a subordinate contract with my master, with that fellow, he doesn't have the grace of absolute control over his servants. As long as I become stronger than him, then I'll be able to resist. However, it was only later that Pest realized how naive that thought of hers was. Right at this moment, a strange phenomenon occurred. Roar. 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 An earth-shattering roar suddenly resounded through the entire sky, causing the ground to tremble slightly. The sudden strange phenomenon and sound caused both Letitia and Pest to be greatly alarmed. They cried out in alarm. What? What happened? What? What happened? Ignoring Letitia and Pest's astonishment, Noah's expression immediately sunk. As expected. Noah's premonition had come true once again. Noah stood up abruptly. Without even turning his head around, he gave the order. You two, go gather all the children in the base and send them to the underground sanctuary. Yes. Understood. Letitia and Pest replied at the same time. Then, they left. As for Noah, he looked at the sky outside the window. Then, he suddenly turned into a ray of light and flew into the distance. Chapter 1350. When Noah, who had transformed into a stream of light and shot towards the sky, arrived at the sky above the outer gate of 2105380, the scene that appeared in front of him made Noah somewhat surprised. Roar, 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 roar. Fierce roars still resounded throughout the entire sky. And the ones who roared like that were the aberrations. They had bodies like white snakes and limbs like lizards. Their heads were the kind that looked like they had been longing for food for a long time, dripping saliva, and had a ferocious appearance like a dragon or tiger. Furthermore, almost every xenomorph had two of these heads. Two-headed dragon. If he had to use a word to describe it, this was the only word Noah could think of. This two-headed xenomorph was like a swarm of ants as it swarmed over from one end of the horizon. At the same time, it let out a series of earth-shattering roars, causing the ground to tremble and the atmosphere to become chaotic. Even space itself seemed to be slightly distorted. It was extremely terrifying. Of course, if it was only their ferocious appearance, then to Noah, those two-headed dragons were no different from real ants. Not to mention a threat, they were simply decorations. However, the terrifying aura carried by the two-headed dragons told Noah that the two-headed dragons were extremely powerful. It was definitely not just their ferocious appearance. Based on initial estimates, each of those two-headed dragons had at least 5 digits worth of strength. Furthermore, Noah even sensed an aura that was not at all inferior to that of Arkle, who was under Lu's control, and Pest, who had transformed into a deity, from the group of twin-headed dragons swarming over like ants. Such a group of two-headed dragons was as dense as ants as they swarmed in the direction of the outer gate of 2105380. This scene made Noah's expression sink bit by bit. Even Noah was like this, let alone White Yiksha, who was the ruler of the East District. Damn it. Without any warning, White Yiksha's figure suddenly flashed beside Noah. Looking at the two-headed dragon swarming over from the end of the horizon, a shocked and angry expression appeared on his face. Why would all the clones of the absolute evil demon king appear here? Absolute evil? Noah's body trembled as he looked at White Yiksha in astonishment. You're saying that those two-headed dragons are split bodies of absolute evil? The fire worship sex demonic dragon, Azidakaha? Az-Dakar. It was the demonic dragon recorded in the ancient Persian Empire, which was known as the Sect of Fire. This demonic dragon was called Absolute Evil by the people in the Box Court. This was because it was a trial that existed to destroy the human race. Humanity's final trial. Noah softly muttered. With the title of God Slayer, an existence above the three strongest races of Hakata? That was right. The demon dragon, who was known as the final trial of humans, was the evil god of the fire worship sect, who was above the three strongest clans in the box court and existed only to destroy humans. They could not be defeated by existences other than humans. The gods that were killed by it would have their souls and existence completely erased. Doing evil for the sake of doing evil. Only killing for the sake of killing. Therefore, it was called absolute evil. Therefore, it was called God Slayer. In the box court, it was one of the oldest demon kings. It did not need to abuse its authority to fall. It was born as a demon king. It was one of the most terrifying, vile, and ferocious demon kings in the three digits. Because the blood that flowed out of its wounds had the property of constantly producing clones, and it had an extremely strong immortality, it was sealed 200 years ago. It was said that in the battle against this three-headed dragon 200 years ago, many communities at the top of the box court paid a great price before they finally succeeded in sealing it. It was also in that battle that a large amount of blood flowed out of the three-headed dragon's body and turned into a group of split bodies, which were two-headed dragons. They were scattered throughout the box court and continued to cause great and small harm to the box court. And among these two-headed dragons, the first generation of two-headed dragons that were born directly from the blood that flowed out of absolute evil, had the power of a god. In other words, the oldest demon king in the three digits was a terrifying existence that could form a group of gods by itself. Now, the blood left behind by that terrifying existence when it was sealed 200 years ago appeared in the most direct form in front of Noah's eyes. Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! White Yiksha shouted angrily and anxiously. His entire body shook with a terrifying aura that made the space wail. Although I don't know why the clones of absolute evil would appear here collectively, we must not let that group of evil dragons rush into the outer gate. Otherwise, I'm afraid the Eastern District will be covered in blood. White Yiksha, who was anxious, was about to rush down when he sensed a strange feeling. He suddenly raised his head, his pupils constricted, and shouted at White Yiksha. White Yiksha! Look up! Hearing this, White Yiksha raised his head almost reflexively and looked up. Then, his pupils constricted. He saw that high up in the sky, a pitch-black rain was gently falling. That light rain was actually a contract document. A pitch-black contract document. Demon King. White Yiksha's expression turned extremely ugly. So that's how it is. Where did the Demon King control the clones of absolute evil, and lure the two-headed dragon army to attack the Eastern District? Not to mention White Yiksha, even Noah's heart sank fiercely. If that was really the case, then it would be terrible. After all, in the Eastern District, not only were there innocent and powerless citizens, there were also more than 130 children in and no name. If the Demon King and the two-headed dragon group really attacked the Eastern District, then it would really be over. At the same time, the residents of the Eastern District who had noticed the two-headed dragon swarming over from the horizon and the pitch-black contract document falling from the sky also fell into a state of panic. Their faces were filled with terror as they screamed and fled in all directions. The screams of the adults resounded through the sky. The cries of the children reverberated back and forth. For a time, the streets below fell into a state of extreme panic, causing the residents to cry and scream as they fled in all directions. Master. Letitia and Pest flew over from afar and landed beside Noah. Looking at the two-headed dragons rushing over from the horizon, the pretty faces of the two girls turned deathly pale in an instant. Az Dakaha's clones. Letitia's body trembled slightly. Why did they appear here? Are you kidding? Pest also had a look of disbelief. In the box court, can those fellows not even put on a chain and let them do whatever they want? Damn it. White Yiksha became extremely anxious. What should we do? What should we do? Even if it was a top-notch existence in the box court, in the face of absolute numbers, it would not be able to protect everyone in the Eastern District from the two-headed dragon group that blotted out the sky and covered the earth, right? This fact made White Yiksha unable to help but feel anxious. Seeing White Yiksha, who was always full of confidence, lose his self-control, Noah knew that the most ancient demon king with the titles of Absolute Evil and God Slayer had left a deep impression on the star spirit of the sun. This made Noah calm down instead, and he pressed down on White Yiksha's shoulder. Now is not the time to hesitate. Quickly use the name of the ruler of the level to gather the community in the Eastern District and prepare to join forces to resist the two-headed dragon group. Also, have Thousand Eyes evacuate the people. No. It's too late. White Yiksha shook his head. Before we can gather and evacuate the people, the two-headed dragon group will attack the residential area. Do as I say, Noah said in an unquestionable tone. Immediately after, he looked at the two-headed dragon group that was surging over. Before that, I will block that group of monsters. You? White Yiksha was stunned. Master? Letitia and Pest were also stunned on the spot. Under such circumstances, Noah suddenly took a step forward. Boom! The next moment, a monstrous golden wave rose from Noah's body and turned into rolling waves that spread in all directions. Chapter 1351. Resplendent golden waves of air transformed into shockwaves visible to the naked eye, explosively expanding from Noah's body. At this moment, the source of mana within Noah's body, which was originally filled with boundless mana, suddenly changed. The energy within it all transformed into divine power, causing the mana source to transform into a source of divine power. Divine power as vast as the ocean surged back and forth within Noah's body, then rushed out of his body, forming golden waves visible to the naked eye. Wave after wave shook the surroundings, filling the entire space. Wah! Letitia and Pest were both startled. Immediately after, they were blasted away by the incoming golden waves of air. This is... White Yiksha also raised a hand, blocking in front of his body. His gaze towards Noah was filled with astonishment. Under such circumstances, Noah's pitch-black eyes suddenly flashed as he looked at the group of twin-headed dragons surging over from the other side of the horizon with his back to White Yiksha. Thou hast violated the contract, bringing evil to the world. The sacred words transformed into sound waves, slowly spreading out. The Lord says, sinners must be punished. Their backs will be shattered, their bones, tendons, hair, and brains dug out. Their blood and mud will be trampled upon. If I am one whose sharp teeth cannot approach, then I will obey the Lord's words and give the one who violated the contract a hammer of destruction. In Noah's heart, on the outline of the stone plate that represented authority, one of the 10 diagrams suddenly lit up. It was a diagram depicting a group of ferocious beasts. One of the authority of Noah's 10 incarnations, the beast horde incarnation, instantly blossomed with a bright radiance. Wang! Immediately, the golden waves of air that filled the entire horizon violently surged, condensing into various forms. The beast horde incarnation's ability was to use pure mana and divine power to create all kinds of tamed beasts. Thus, the golden waves that filled the entire horizon transformed into numerous xenomorphs. Among those xenomorphs, there were some that had the head of an ox and the body of an ox, but were standing on 2 feet. Among those aliens, some had a lizard-like body, but they were also lizard men who stood on their feet. Apart from the Taurans and lizard men, there were also various humanoid orcs that gradually took shape in the golden airwaves that filled the entire sky. Roar, 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 roar. The mutated beast men raised their heads and roared, causing the chaotic and terrifying roars to resound through the entire sky. Immediately after, golden ripples rippled out from the sides of the ferocious and terrifying beast men. It just so happened that every orc was equipped with one. Inside, a variety of luxurious treasures such as sabers, swords, spears, halberds, and so on slowly appeared and gathered in the space. Roaring at the sky, the mutated orcs reached out their hands at the same time as if they had a telepathic connection. They abruptly pulled out their treasures from the golden ripples around them. Thus, one after another, the orcs appeared in the skies, each wielding a divine artifact bestowed upon them. Roar, 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 roar. With roars that shook the air, the mutated orcs holding noble artifacts fell from the sky like raindrops, covering the sky and covering the earth. Roar, 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 roar. The two-headed dragon pack that was surging over from the other end of the horizon finally noticed the mutated orcs that were descending from the sky. Their scarlet eyes flashed with a ruthless bloody light. Not to be outdone, they let out an earth-shattering roar and continued their charge without slowing down. Roar, 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 roar. On one side, the mutated beasts descended from the sky with many legendary weapons in their hands. Roar, 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 roar. On the other side, the two-headed dragons surged with a ruthless bloody light flashing in their eyes. The two mutated camps finally met on the vast battlefield that stretched as far as the eye could see. Boom! At that moment it was as if two monstrous waves collided at the same time, causing a loud boom that shook the heavens and the earth. The mutated beasts, who were wielding many legendary-grade weapons, suddenly met with the two-headed dragons, whose eyes were flashing with blood-red light. An intense conflict broke out. The two-headed dragons were all clones that were split from the three-headed demon dragon of the fire worship sect. It was said that each of the clones born from the blood of the oldest demon king, which numbered in the hundreds, had the power of a deity. However, not all of the two-headed dragons were the first-generation clones born from Azidakaha's blood. Like Azidakaha, his clones also had the ability to multiply. That was why there was such a terrifying number of them. Only the first generation of avatars that were born directly from Azidakaha's blood had the power of a deity. As for the second-generation clones that were split from the first-generation clones, and even the third-generation clones that were split from the second-generation clones, their power would decrease by one level according to the increase in generation. Therefore, among the densely packed twin-headed dragons, only the first generation of twin-headed dragons had deity-level power, while the rest only had around the 5-digit levels of the bottom level. Facing such a group of twin-headed dragons, the alien beastmen fearlessly charged forward with earth-shaking roars, continuously waving the weapons in their hands at the twin-headed dragons biting at them. Poochie 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 poochie. The legendary weapons easily penetrated the bodies of the two-headed dragons. Blood splashed all over the sky, and the ferocious two-headed dragons fell one after another. However, before they fell, the blood that splashed out from the pierced bodies of the two-headed dragons stopped in midair and suddenly transformed into smaller two-headed dragons that continued to roar and pounce in the direction of the mutated beastmen wielding legendary-grade weapons. That was the terrifying part of the two-headed dragons. Even if they died, the blood that splashed from their bodies would still turn into clones that would continue to fight. If the two-headed dragons were not completely annihilated and turned into ashes, it would be impossible to stop this kind of splitting. In the end, it would only lead to facing enemies that were much weaker, but whose numbers were constantly increasing. Of course, there was a limit to this kind of splitting. The split of the two-headed dragon required the splitting of its own spirit core to form a split body. In other words, every split would be accompanied by a decrease in the spirit lattice. When the spirit could no longer support the splitting, then no matter how much blood there was, it would not be able to form clones. Under such circumstances, the mutated orcs wielding legendary-grade weapons roared in excitement and madness as they bravely charged into the two-headed dragon horde, fighting with all their might. Facing the extremely valiant mutated orcs, facing the legendary weapons, the two-headed dragons could only rely on numbers to win, and began to attack in batches. Sometimes, 3 or 4 two-headed dragons would pounce on one mutated orc. Sometimes, 10 or 20 two-headed dragons would attack one mutated orc together. Relying on the absolute human wave tactic, the two-headed dragon horde gradually surrounded the mutated orcs and attacked them with all their might. Under such an attack, there would always be mutated orcs that were unable to hold on. Poochie. Accompanied by the sound of tearing, the first mutated orc that was bitten by the two-headed dragons finally appeared, half of its body torn apart by the sharp fangs. However, the mutated orc that had its body torn apart let out a berserk roar, abandoned the treasures in its hands, and madly pounced on the two-headed dragons. A magnificent white light suddenly rose from the mutated orc's body, and instantly covered the two-headed dragons. Pung! The two-headed dragons that were covered by the magnificent white light directly exploded, and turned into blood that filled the sky. The clones called Beast Horde could not only create all kinds of tamed beasts to do battle. The tamed beasts that were created, regardless of the species, would have the ability to crush everything. As such, the situation on the chaotic battlefield was reversed once again. Chapter 1352. High up in the sky, Noah's eyes were tightly closed. His entire body was surging with a vast amount of divine power, causing the golden waves to continuously reverberate throughout the entire sky. At this moment, Noah was wholeheartedly focused on controlling the beast horde, allowing the orcs to bravely kill the enemies within the densely packed group of twin-headed dragons. Without Noah's control, the tamed beasts created through the beast horde would only be able to carry out simple attacks. In that case, even if they had weapons equivalent to godhood, they would only be able to increase their killing power by a bit. It would not be of any help at all. Only with Noah's wholehearted control could the orcs with noble artifacts in their hands be able to kill without restraint. Only when facing the twin-headed dragons outside of the first generation could these orcs use the sharpness of their noble artifacts to fight 1 against 10, or even 1 against 100. In terms of numbers, the orcs were at an overwhelming disadvantage. It was not that Noah did not want to create more tamed beasts, but even if his divine power was limitless, the amount of divine power that Noah could use at once was still limited. In a situation where the amount of divine power that could be used at once was limited, the number of Noah's beast horde was also destined to be limited. After all, the characteristic of a beast horde was that the more there were, the weaker the individual strength would be. If only one tamed beast was created, then that tamed beast's strength would definitely reach the peak of 4 digits, comparable to most of the Asuras, gods, and Buddhas of the 3 strongest races. However, if the number of tamed beasts increased, then just like how the twin-headed dragons needed to split their spiritual cores to form a split body, the power of the tamed beasts that were created would also be dispersed as the number of tamed beasts increased. Currently, Noah relied on the beast horde to create over 1,000 orcs. This number, compared to the twin-headed dragons that were densely packed with tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of them, was naturally at an overwhelming disadvantage. However, with such a large number of orcs, every single one of them would have top-notch power in the 5 digits. They would be able to fight against the first-generation 2-headed dragon at the level of a deity. In addition to the precious artifacts that only existed in various myths and legends, which were equivalent to the bestowed weapons of the divinity level, the orcs could even kill the first-generation 2-headed dragon by themselves. Even if they couldn't kill them, the beastman's ability to shatter everything would pull them along and vanish from the battlefield. In this way, the thousands of orcs holding noble artifacts were able to resist the densely packed double-headed dragon army and were entangled on the entire battlefield. For a moment, the light of blades and shadows of swords flashed and blood splattered everywhere. The roars of the orcs and the demonic dragons mixed together, echoing throughout the battlefield, filling the air with murderous intent. Seeing this scene, Letitia and Pest were filled with astonishment. Is this Master's true power? Letitia stared at Noah's back in disbelief. It's too frightening. Master Noah, that power is even greater than that of my past companions. This evaluation could not be said to be low. After all, among Letitia's past companions, many of them had challenged all kinds of Asuras, gods and Buddhas and obtained victory. Among them, there were even existences that held sovereignty over the sun. By relying on those companions, the predecessor of the community known as No Name became the greatest power in the Eastern District. Thus, if Letitia's evaluation were to be known by her acquaintances, they would definitely be shocked. However, those who saw this scene before their eyes would definitely not doubt that this evaluation was too high. One of the most frightening aspects of the human's final trial, Az Dakaha, was that he was able to create a group of gods with his own power. And now, Noah was doing the same thing with his own power. There was no need for bloodshed. There was no need for injuries. With his own power, Noah created a group of beasts that could rival a group of gods. With such power, how could it not be frightening? Of course, Noah did not have the ability to create a group of gods with his own power. Although the beastmen, who were comparable to gods, were terrifying, they were only composed of pure divine power. They were lifeless. They were unconscious. They were soulless. Once Noah stopped using his divine power, the group of beasts would also be cancelled. The orcs that could rival gods would also disappear. As for the two-headed dragon that was born from Az-Dakaha's blood, it could exist eternally. Thus, in this aspect, Noah was indeed inferior to the most ancient demon king. However, even so, being able to create a group of gods that could rival a group of gods in a short period of time was still very frightening. That guy, could he be a monster? Pest trembled. Have I really been an enemy of that guy? It was only at this moment that Pest finally understood. Last time, during their battle, Noah did not use his full power at all. The power that he displayed was merely the tip of the iceberg. Become even stronger than that guy? Pest realized how naive her previous thoughts were. How could such a thing be possible? While Letitia and Pest were still in shock, Noah, who had his back facing the two servants he had contracted with, started to feel anxious. Is it still not done? White Yiksha. If one were to observe carefully, they would definitely be able to discover it. As time passed, the two-headed dragon group's battle line was slowly approaching the city. If this continued, it would only be a matter of time before the two-headed dragon group invaded the outer gate. It was not that the group of beasts was not powerful enough. It was just that the number of opponents was too great. If one wanted to completely stop the two-headed dragon group, it would not be enough to rely on just over 1,000 orcs. Unless they increased their numbers. However, once their numbers increased, the orc strength would also be scattered. They would not be able to stop the two-headed dragon group's attack. In that way, they would only be able to break through even faster. This was the advantage of numbers. It was precisely because of this advantage that someone as powerful as White Yiksha would feel extremely anxious when the two-headed dragon group attacked. If he did not have to consider the lives and deaths of the residents in the city, then with White Yiksha's strength, even if he were to face the densely packed two-headed dragon group, he would be able to fight for 3 days and 3 nights. In the end, he would be able to eliminate all the two-headed dragons without suffering any damage. However, under the situation where he needed to protect the residents in the courtyard, there was no time at all. Once he could not stop the two-headed dragon army and allowed 1 in 1,000 of them to invade the residential area, it would definitely cause a lot of casualties. That was what Noah and White Yiksha did not want to see. If he did not have to consider the advancement of the enemy army's battle line, Noah would have long used a large-scale destruction clone or a relic to annihilate the two-headed dragon group. He could not do so now because he had cancelled the group of beasts. If he used a large-scale destruction clone or a relic, then no matter how many two-headed dragons were annihilated, in the end, there would definitely be fish that escaped the net and break into the city to start a massacre. The number of enemies was simply too great. In addition, they could multiply endlessly. If he did not prepare a certain number of people to fight, he would not be able to resist at all. Seeing that the two-headed dragon group was getting closer and closer to the outer gate, Noah clenched his teeth. There's no other way. The divine power that was surging in Noah's body began to surge crazily. In Noah's heart, on the outline of the stone plate that was connected to the 10 patterns, apart from the group of beasts, another pattern began to emit light. Just as Noah was about to use his true strength and use 2 clones at the same time, a gentle voice sounded. You've worked hard, kid. Leave the rest to me. Hearing this voice, Noah's heart calmed down. The next moment, in the city, loud and clear shouts soared into the sky. Oh, 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 oh. Troops holding high the community flag surged out of the city and charged in the direction of the two-headed dragon group. As for White Yiksha, in a flash, he appeared beside Noah. You're finally here. Noah could not help but heave a sigh of relief. If you came a little later, I would really have to use my trump card. In other words, that's not your full strength, right? White Yiksha narrowed his eyes and suddenly spoke. That's great. Kid, hurry to the North District immediately. Chapter 1353. The North District. White Yiksha's words caused Noah, Letitia, and Pest to be stunned. Head to the North District now? What kind of joke was this? Right now, the Eastern District was at a critical juncture. It could be completely destroyed by the densely packed twin-headed dragons at any time, turning it into a dead zone. Letting Noah go to the North District at such a critical time? Are you kidding me? Noah furrowed his brows. Do you think it's possible for me to leave at this time? I know that the lives of more than 130 children from no name are in the East District. It's impossible for you not to worry. But don't worry, I've already arranged for them to take refuge. White Yiksha looked at Noah with an extremely serious expression. Right now, the North District needs you the most. Needs me the most? Noah's heart skipped a beat. Could it be, that's right. White Yiksha gritted his teeth. Just now, I received news that apart from the East District, the South and North District were also attacked by demon kings. Now, they've completely fallen into chaos. The South and North District were attacked by demon kings? Letitia was shocked and couldn't help but take a step forward. Impossible. How can there be demon kings attacking 3 regions at the same time? That's what I thought too, but that's the truth. White Yiksha's expression didn't look good either. Although I don't want to think this way, the fact that demon kings attacked 3 regions at such a coincidental time proves that multiple demon kings have already joined hands and even formed an alliance to plan an attack on 3 regions at the same time. Demon Kings Alliance. Letitia muttered in disbelief. Is that even possible? How is it not possible? White Yiksha sneered. In the box court, it's not like there aren't other demon kings forming an alliance. Since there's one, it's not strange that there's another one. Pest's eyes flickered slightly when she heard this. She lowered her head and remained silent. Bayasha, who did not notice this scene, looked straight at Noah and said, right now, the situation in the Northern District is very critical. The enemy clearly knows that one of the leaders in the Northern District is not only too young, but also a newcomer who recently took up the position. They are currently gathering their forces to attack the community of that leader. There was no need to explain which community this was. Who else could it be other than Shadora's Salamandra? Is that why you need me to save you? Noah was stunned. What about the Southern District? Although the situation in the Southern District isn't very good, it's at least much better than the Northern District. In addition, the members of No Name are coincidentally there and are displaying combat strength that can't be ignored. The situation is slowly improving, White Yiksha said in a pleading tone. Meanwhile, the East District is currently being attacked by the Demon Dragon's clones in the final trial of the humans. It's impossible for us to send anyone else to provide reinforcements, so I can only rely on you. Without a doubt, Noah, who could even temporarily block the densely packed 2-headed dragon horde, had the power to change the current situation in any region. Now that no region could send anyone to provide reinforcements to other regions, Noah's rescue became the most important. However, the most critical situation was still the Eastern District. Perhaps because they had considered the existence of the Sun Star Spirit, White Yiksha, the Demon King Alliance directly used the Fire Worship Sect's 3-headed demon dragon's clones to attack. The twin-headed dragon horde, which could produce more bodies once they bled, was simply too terrifying. Their numbers would remain high. Even Noah was almost forced to use his full strength. With the current strength of the Eastern District, could they resist the 2-headed dragon army? If they could not, the children in No Name would be in danger. At this time, Noah was really unwilling to leave. Have you really thought it through? Noah looked up and stared at White Yiksha. Although you're indeed very strong, there are too many enemies. If I'm here, the situation will definitely be better. But without me, even you might not be able to defend the Eastern District. Is that okay? Moreover, don't forget that other than the Fire Worship Sect's 3-headed demon dragon's clones, the enemy's demon king has yet to appear, Noah said word by word. The enemy's demon king has already used the organizer's authority to start the game. Do you have a way to deal with the demon king and the demon dragon's clones at the same time to protect the entire Eastern District? Hearing this, White Yiksha smiled. That smile caused the entire space to freeze. Who do you think I am? White Yiksha's entire body trembled with an extremely terrifying aura. Perhaps with my current strength, I won't be able to block the attacks of the two-headed dragon horde and the demon king at the same time. In that case, I'll just bring out the absolute strongest power. This sentence caused Noah, Letitia, and Pest's hearts to tremble at the same time. As the former incarnation of the heavenly shaking theory, even though White Yiksha's spiritual lattice had shrunk as the heavenly shaking theory was gradually negated, he still possessed a powerful spiritual lattice that did not need to belong to any sect. However, White Yiksha had chosen to convert to Buddhism and obtain the Yiksha divinity. There were no benefits to such an action. For others, obtaining a divinity was equivalent to an explosive increase in strength and life level. However, as one of the three most powerful species, obtaining a divinity would only degrade White Yiksha's own spiritual lattice. After all, the so-called divinity was actually a gift from the gods to other species. As a star spirit, White Yiksha did not need to be bestowed by the gods. If he accepted such a gift, it would undoubtedly be admitting that he was inferior to the god who bestowed the divinity. In this way, the spiritual lattice, which was equivalent to merit and inheritance, would naturally be devalued, causing the top powers of the Hecate to be suppressed and sealed. In the end, White Yiksha willingly accepted such a devaluation. This was because, as an existence with more than 3 digits in the Hecate, he could not casually interfere with the direction of the lower class. In order to interfere with the lower class with his status as the ruler of the class and protect the residents of the lower class, White Yiksha was willing to convert to Buddhism and obtain the Yiksha divinity. He lowered his spiritual lattice and changed from the famous White Knight King to White Yiksha. Now, White Yiksha had said this. She wanted to bring out an absolute supreme power above this. Then, the answer to what White Yiksha wanted to do was very obvious. You. Pest spoke in a somewhat bewildered manner. You want to return the divinity to Buddhism and retrieve the sealed power? 3 years ago, the East District was also attacked by an extremely powerful demon king. White Yiksha did not answer. Instead, he seemed to be looking into the distance and muttered softly. At that time, I had been hesitating and unwilling to return the divinity to repel the attacking demon king. In the end, it caused No Name, the largest faction in the East District, to be destroyed by the demon king. It was too late for regrets. After saying that, White Yiksha looked at Noah, Letitia, and Pest and smiled faintly. This time, I will definitely not repeat the same mistake and let the East District suffer great damage because of my hesitation. As he said this, White Yiksha walked forward step by step in the air as if he was walking on flat ground. As White Yiksha walked, his aura would increase exponentially with every step he took. So, leave this place to me. I'll have to trouble you in the North District. Seeing that White Yiksha's aura were becoming more and more terrifying, so terrifying that even Noah could not help but become solemn, Letitia and Pest looked at Noah with cold sweat on their faces. Master Noah, Master, Letitia and Pest could not help but call out softly, finally dispelling the last trace of hesitation in Noah's heart. After taking a deep look at White Yiksha's back that was surging with an astonishing aura, Noah turned around and threw out this sentence. Let's go to the North District. In the next second, Noah, Letitia, and Pest turned into streams of light and flew in the direction of the Realm Gate. At the last moment before entering the Realm Gate and being teleported to the North District, Noah clearly felt it. An extremely terrifying power gradually formed in the sky above the entire East District. Chapter 1354. Box 54545 Outer Gate. Just like the outer sect serial numbers, this was a 5-digit level. In this 5-digit outer sect, there was a city. The name of the city was the City of Brilliant Flames. Just like the name of the city, one could see red and golden flames everywhere in the city. The flames were coming from 2 different parts. One was a huge chandelier hanging in the center of the city. One was the hot wind blowing out from the ironworks in the city. The former was a huge, warm chandelier with a diameter of more than 50 meters. In the Northern District, the climate was actually very harsh. Everyone relied on the gift of light and warmth to live in the extreme cold of the northern district. Otherwise, ordinary humans would not be able to live here. In the capital of brilliant flames, it was that huge chandelier that brought warmth to the city and dyed the entire city into dusk. The latter was also a feature of the northern district. Due to the harsh environment in the northern district, the residents here valued the ability to produce their own products and ensure their eternal use. Therefore, in the cities of the northern district, it was common to see ironworks that could produce and process all kinds of gifts used in daily life. The flames from these two characteristics illuminated the entire blazing flame capital with the color of dusk. The scene was quite beautiful. Unfortunately, in such a beautiful city, there was a conflict that could be described as a riot. This was because Blazing Flames City was the base of the 5-digit community, Salamandra. Caw, 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 caw. It was a group of deans who were as tall as birds. They were giants who held huge clubs and swords in their hands. They had the appearance of humans and wore masks on their faces. They looked like savages. If there was any difference between them and the savages, it would be that their bodies, which were taller than many buildings, gave off an astonishing sense of oppression. Amidst the tremors of the ground, they rushed in different directions. Bang! The buildings that were hit by the giants' club shattered like models. Kacha! The ground that was stomped by the giant's foot cracked open without any suspense. Caw, 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 caw. A group of giants, numbering in the hundreds or even thousands, were rushing back and forth on the streets of the entire blazing flame capital. They destroyed the buildings while attacking the surroundings. Of course, destroying buildings was not the goal of the giants. What the giants really wanted to attack was not the buildings, but the flying dragons flying back and forth around them. Roar, roar, roar. The winged dragons, covered in scales, issued deafening roars as they flew back and forth around the giants, roaring at them again and again. Every time the wyverns roared at the giants, a scorching flame breath would shoot out of the wyverns' mouths and envelop the giants. The giants' skin, hair, and even clothes were scorched black, causing them to howl in pain. Unfortunately, such flames were not enough to cause much damage to the giants. Therefore, the giants completely ignored the continuous burning of their bodies and wildly waved the weapons in their hands around. Bang! A wyvern was unfortunately struck by a huge club. Blood flowed out of its body as it fell to the ground like a kite with a broken string. The same scene kept happening in every corner of Brilliant Flame City. Clearly, the giants were gaining the upper hand in the battle between the giants and the wyverns, and the situation was constantly expanding. The scene of the giants and the wyverns fighting each other made the entire Blazing Flame capital seem like a sci-fi movie that could only be seen on the screen. It was extremely shocking. Although there were some giants who were unable to hold on and were turned into flaming men by the flame breath of the wyverns, the casualties were relatively light compared to the wyverns. If this continued, it would only be a matter of time before the wyverns all fell under the attacks of the giants. At this moment, the gate of Brilliant Flame City flashed with light. The moment Noah, Letitia, and Pest's group appeared, the scene that appeared before their eyes caused the three of them to narrow their eyes simultaneously. Noah could almost instantly tell who had the upper hand in the battle between the giants and the wyverns. Because of that, Noah directly ordered Letitia and Pest to attack. You two stay here and help the wyverns deal with the giants. I'll go to Salamandra's base to look for Shadora. In the world of the Black Bullet, Noah used his identity as the leader of the Cursed Child Guild that took in the entire Tokyo area to protect his children and companions from the decadent regime. In the world of the God Slayer, Noah used his identity as the king to visit many magic societies and ancient powers in Italy. In the underground tomb of Nasarick, Noah was treated as the highest ruler and ruler. He managed the entire Nasarick. Although he could not casually give out orders, it was natural for him to do so. There was not the slightest bit of unfamiliarity or inappropriateness. Therefore, as Noah's subordinates, Vampire and Grim Reaper subconsciously responded. Yes. After replying, Letitia unfurled her shadow-like wings. Pest also floated in the air in a somewhat vexed manner. The two of them turned into two rays of light and flew toward the battlefield in glorious Flame City. As for Noah, just as he was about to fly in the direction of Salamandra's base, he suddenly felt a sense of danger. Noah's figure suddenly became sluggish. Without any hesitation, he turned around and waved his LV towards one of the directions. Level 5, and all of his strength was at the A stage of strength, and it was a full power attack. Whoosh! At the same time, a figure suddenly appeared in front of Noah, who had turned around abruptly, and punched out with a terrifying force. Dong! The collision between the fists caused a muffled sound that made people's hearts shrink. It was as if meteorites had collided with each other, setting off a violent shockwave that shook in all directions. Under this ferocious force, the ground directly exploded and caved in. Under this ferocious chi force, both parties who had punched out at the same time were fiercely shaken away. Like cannonballs, they rubbed against the air and scraped out a gully on the ground. They pulled apart a considerable distance before they came to a stop. After stabilizing his body, Noah slowly grasped his somewhat numb arm. He raised his head and looked forward. There, the young man who was also clenching his fist met Noah's gaze. The corner of his mouth rose, revealing a somewhat joyful smile. "We meet again." Hearing that, Noah narrowed his eyes. "We meet again." "Yes. We meet again." Although Noah could not see the other party's appearance because of the black robe last time, the familiar aura that he felt with his perception ability allowed Noah to easily recognize the young man. Are you the black-robed man last time?" "Sorry, I don't seem to have introduced myself." The young man raised his clenched fist and looked at Noah with a pair of golden eyes that flashed with light. "Although I can't say my real name, others call me Your Highness. Please take care of me." "Your Highness?" Noah straightened his body and spoke very calmly. "Since you can introduce yourself to me with such a title, then can I assume that this joint attack on the Demon King Alliance in the East, South, and North regions was ordered by you?" "You guessed wrong on this point," His Highness said without denying it. "Although I was called so great by others, I am not the one who actually made the decision. If I must say, I can only say that I have a little bit of status, right?" "I see." Noah first closed his eyes, then suddenly opened them. "Then, there is a reason to take you down." Chapter 1355. Take me down? Hearing Noah's words, His Highness raised his eyebrows, and the smile on his face gradually began to fade. "Well, that's not bad. After all, I wasn't too satisfied with the last battle, so it's not bad to continue here." Saying such a sentence, His Highness stared at Noah and took a step forward. With this step, a surging aura gushed out from His Highness' body, turning into a substantial wave of air, causing His Highness' robe to flutter. This aura was even more powerful than the last time when he fought Noah at No Name's base. And just as this thought flashed through Noah's mind, His Highness suddenly turned into a bolt of lightning with a bang. With a fierce force that caused the ground to sink, he flashed and appeared in front of Noah with an extremely powerful aura. In the next moment, His Highness clenched his right fist, and with a punch without any fancy moves, he heavily punched towards Noah's chest. This punch was ordinary and nothing special. However, under the fierce wind, where the wind from the punch passed, the air was all shaken away, making a deep sonic boom. Although it was just an ordinary punch, the power contained within it was likely that even a building would be blasted into powder in an instant. Noah's heart trembled slightly when he sensed the fist that was accompanied by an unusually sharp fist wind. Although he suppressed His Highness like last time, Noah knew that this guy who called himself His Highness might be more difficult to deal with than 16 knights. In terms of physical strength, His Highness estimated that he could match 16 knights, right? No. If His Highness was using his full strength, then the 16 knights reversal should still be able to suppress His Highness. If reverse 16 knights and His Highness were to fight, then reverse 16 knights should have the upper hand. However, Noah was not 16 knights, and his fighting style was not limited to close combat. It would be better to say that close combat was not Noah's forte. Noah's real strength was his sword skills, and the endless treasures in the Gate of Babylon. As for authority, that was Noah's trump card. Compared to these, close combat was indeed not Noah's strong point. Under such circumstances, Noah and His Highness' compatibility was really poor. With the gift of invulnerability that even the highest level treasures could not penetrate, Noah's sword skills and treasures were almost all sealed. In this way, the means of fighting against His Highness would become extremely limited. Thinking of this, Noah did not hesitate to turn the energy in his body into magical power, and used strengthening magic to strengthen his body's ability. Wang. Magical lines like electric lines spread from Noah's hands and feet. Noah's feet, he raised his hand. Pang. Amidst the muffled sound, a fist carrying a frightening wind heavily exploded on the raised arm, causing a circle of ripples to spread out from the center of the collision. The ordinary but powerful fist was solidly received by Noah. However, His Highness's expression was abnormally calm, as if he already knew that this kind of fist would not be able to do anything to Noah. With a step, he closed in on Noah. Immediately, His Highness seemed to have transformed into a ferocious beast, as he repeatedly waved his fists at Noah. The powerful energy was like an impact, accompanied by the wind from his fists, and fell in the direction of Noah like raindrops. Under His Highness's abnormally fierce attack, Noah's figure once again quickly retreated. As he retreated, Noah stared at the shadows of the fists that were coming at him like raindrops. It was as though he could see the path of the fists that were coming at him like a storm. He suddenly raised his arm. Peng 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 peng. A series of heavy collisions rang out, accompanied by a series of shockwaves that reverberated in the surroundings. That was Noah unhurriedly blocking his arm with the smallest amplitude and the shortest trajectory, as if he had calculated where His Highness's fists would fall, and continuously received the incoming fists. Suddenly, His Highness and Noah respectively advanced and retreated, one like a beast launching a storm-like attack, the other like a fluttering leaf in a storm, unhurriedly retreating and blocking, causing the energy generated by the collision to shake repeatedly, resounding throughout the entire space. Seeing that Noah was retreating and blocking at the same time, and had no intention of taking the initiative to attack, His Highness's brows were tightly knitted, and his figure pressed towards Noah in an even more ferocious manner. His fists carried a powerful force, turning into a sky full of fists, directly enveloping Noah. Looking at the scene, it was as if the area in front of Noah was covered by fists, which was abnormally strange. This was a strange scene that could only be created when the speed of the fist had reached the extreme. Facing the rapidly enveloping fists, at the moment when the fists were about to land on Noah's body, Noah's pair of pitch-black deep eyes suddenly flashed, and he actually ignored the numerous fists that were covering the sky and earth, and finally clenched one of his hands to his waist. Immediately, that fist was like an arrow that pierced through the air, tearing through the layers of fists. Finally, it fiercely slammed into a fist that was hidden behind the numerous fists, and seemed to be much more condensed than the other fists. The moment the two fists collided, the fists that filled the sky directly dissipated, causing an astonishing wave of air to erupt like a gale. In the next second, Noah finally took the initiative to make a move for the first time since the beginning of the match. Taking advantage of the moment when His Highness's figure was slightly stagnant due to the full force of the punch, Noah suddenly withdrew his hand that had collided with His Highness's fist, and with a stomp of his foot, his entire body suddenly charged forward. The distance between Noah and His Highness was originally less than 2 meters. Therefore, Noah's charge almost didn't even take the blink of an eye, and his entire person flashed into His Highness's arms, and directly crashed into him without any reduction in momentum. In the midst of the muffled sound, Noah's body leaned sideways, and his shoulder heavily collided with His Highness's chest. His Highness suddenly groaned, and his body became unstable, and he fiercely retreated a few steps. It was also at this moment that Noah directly turned around, and in the direction of His Highness, who was staggering backwards, sent out a powerful kick. A deep sound rang out in the field. His Highness was directly sent flying by Noah's kick. Whoosh! In the sharp sound of breaking through the air, His Highness, who had turned into a cannonball, rubbed against the air, and heavily smashed into the wall of a building in the distance. The entire building, together with the wall, was smashed into pieces. As a result, the smashed building turned into rubble that filled the sky, and collapsed, burying His Highness's figure that was much smaller than the building itself. However, in the next second, the buried pile of rubble suddenly burst open. Inside, His Highness's body was like a bullet that shot out of a barrel, and violently shot in front of Noah. This time, it was His Highness's turn to unceremoniously slam into Noah's body. It was like a collision between two meteorites. Amidst the sound of the collision that made one's scalp numb, this time, it was Noah's body that was sent flying. He turned into a cannonball and slammed heavily into a lighthouse, breaking it in half and collapsing it. After the blessing of LV5 ability value and the strengthening of magic, Noah's physical ability was probably comparable to that of Reverse 16 Knights, who broke the rules. As for His Highness, although he was a little weaker than Reverse 16 Knights, the gap was not so big that it was unimaginable. Therefore, in a pure hand-to-hand battle, the advantage of both sides was not particularly obvious. In this way, both Noah and His Highness were ruthless. In the next moment, the ground was trampled by a terrifying force, causing a heavy sound. Two figures blasted out separately, rushing towards each other at an extremely fast speed that was not much inferior to the speed of Universe 3. Chapter 1356. Dong. The collision seemed to shake the air, causing the ground to tremble. Like living meteorites, Noah and His Highness both had burning eyes and were filled with fighting spirit as they faced each other. Peng 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 peng. The muffled sounds that would hurt people's ears kept echoing in the space. At this moment, the two seemingly ordinary fists continued to greet each other, but they kept colliding with each other. Peng 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 peng. Like heavy rhythmic syllables, the intense muffled sounds kept rising. At this moment, the two sides who were constantly waving their fists at each other intertwined, entangled, and separated in the space. They kept repeating the same action, causing the atmosphere in the air to become extremely fierce. After all, no matter which side it was, their strength was overwhelming. That fist, once swung out, would shake the air. That fist, once hit, would cause an impact. Affected by that kind of power, the ground had already sunk down repeatedly, causing spiderweb-like cracks to spread out continuously on the ground. It was quite a shocking scene. If one was hit by that kind of power, it was believed that even those who were confident in their physical strength would be turned into a pile of minced meat in an instant. Because that kind of power, even if it brushed past the body, would cause an ordinary person's skin to burst open. Because that kind of power, even if it hit the skull, would cause the hard skull to shatter like tofu. However, Noah and His Highness, who were both facing this kind of power, were completely fearless as they faced each other. In the face of a fist that could shake the air and scratch the skin, they also gathered all the strength in their body and bounced it off. In the face of a blow that could smash the skull at any time, they resisted it head-on with their burning immortal fighting spirit. Peng 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 peng. The muffled sounds were incessant. Their arm strength was the same. Their leg strength was the same. Even their physical abilities were almost the same in all aspects. Under such circumstances, Noah and His Highness could only wave their fists, and continuously wave their fists, greeting each other with punches without any fancy moves. After all, when both sides had the same strength, there were only two ways to determine the outcome of the battle. The other was to win by using one's wits to launch a surprise attack. One was a contest of perseverance, to see who could hold on until the end without collapsing. If he didn't do so, it would be impossible to determine the outcome of the battle when both parties had almost the same amount of power. Therefore, Noah and Her Highness could only carry a burning fighting spirit as they swung their fists at each other again and again. Every time they collided, they would be able to incite a violent force that would shatter the earth, break through the atmosphere, shatter the buildings, distort the space, and turn the places they passed into ruins. Presumably, no matter who it was, if they suddenly got involved, they would be affected, right? If it was an ordinary person, they would have been directly engulfed by the shockwave like a meat grinder, spraying blood and minced meat all over the sky. This was how intense the battle was. However, those who fully understood Noah would definitely find this battle situation inconceivable. Why? Because, even if his sword techniques and treasures were sealed by the invulnerability, Noah still had a trump card called Authority. That trump card, once taken out, should be able to reverse the battle situation in an instant, right? However, for some reason, undoubtedly, even at this stalemate, Noah still did not have the thought of using his authority. No. It was not that he did not have the thought of using it. In fact, Noah had long wanted to use his authority, to take down Her Highness in one fell swoop. However, for some reason, every time Noah wanted to use his authority, an inexplicable uneasiness would attack his heart, causing him to instantly dispel the idea. As a result, the battle situation remained in this stalemate. Not knowing if it was because she saw the uneasiness in Noah's heart, Her Highness, who had taken advantage of the situation, stared at Noah's face and suddenly smiled. You seem to have a good intuition, and vaguely felt something, so you have been suppressing your true strength, right? Hearing this, Noah's heart tightened, and his footsteps suddenly staggered as he retreated rapidly. However, Her Highness did not seem to give up. She turned into a bullet and continued to attack Noah. However, your intuition is right. If you use the same strength that you used last time, I can only use my trump card to respond. In this way, that guy will definitely wake up from his long slumber. What's more, if our strength collides and produces too great a shockwave, that guy's seal will be destroyed in the worst-case scenario. Then, we'll be screwed. Zhang Tai said. Zhang Tai continued, but, your intuition is right. If you use the same strength as you did last time, I can only use my trump card to respond to you. That guy? Seal? Noah maintained his retreat as he stared at Her Highness who was fiercely attacking him, and said in a deep voice. In other words, in this capital of flames, there is something terrifying sealed? Well, what exactly is it? Her Highness said unhurriedly. Although I still understand the actual situation, it has been less than 3 years since I was born. Even if I have some knowledge, it is only knowledge that was given along with my birth. Even if you ask me, I can only give you a rough idea, right? What? Noah's expression changed for the first time since the beginning of the battle. It has been less than 3 years since I was born. What kind of joke is this? Of course, Her Highness understood why Noah was so surprised. In this regard, Her Highness acted as if she was not talking about her own affairs. While rushing towards Noah who was retreating rapidly, she said very casually. Don't doubt it, this is the truth. I didn't grow up as a baby, but I had the form of a teenager when I was born, and I was given the knowledge that must be used to grow up as a baby. There are no parents who gave birth to me and raised me, so this is how it is. Hearing this, Noah's eyes fluctuated violently, and he suddenly stopped retreating. Her Highness was slightly startled, but almost like a conditioned reflex, she punched at Noah who suddenly stopped. Pung! Along with an unknown number of muffled sounds, Her Highness' fist was suddenly caught by Noah's palm. Noah just stared at Her Highness' face which was much more immature compared to his own, and couldn't help but murmur. I see, you are the same as me? Noah's words made Her Highness completely stunned on the spot. Same? What did he mean by that? Facing Her Highness' doubts, Noah just blinked his eyes and said faintly. Don't think so much, just like the literal meaning, I am the same as you. There are no parents who gave birth to me and raised me, and I am not a life that grew up as a baby. Instead, I had the form of a teenager when I was born, and I was given the necessary knowledge. Noah's words had an unexpected impact on Her Highness. You. What did you say? Her Highness subconsciously said. But undoubtedly, you are a human? That's right, I am a human, and I have always thought that I am a human. Noah's pair of dark and deep eyes showed a strong will. Although I did not experience the life that a human should have as a baby, and did not have parents who gave birth to me and raised me, I have a grandfather who adopted me, and companions who grew up with me. Saying such a sentence, Noah slowly tightened his grip on Her Highness' fist that fell into his palm. Since I also have a family, relatives, and even a lover that an ordinary human should have, then it doesn't matter why I am so special. Hearing this, Her Highness opened her eyes wide, and then, as if she understood something, she suddenly laughed. So that's the case, this is why I am so obsessed with you, this is what I don't have? Saying this, Her Highness' eyes showed a hostility that had never been seen before. Undoubtedly, you and I are the same, but you exist as a person, and I am just a tool. Saying this, Her Highness broke free from Noah's palm, and in a flash, retreated. In that case, let's end this boring farce here. Chapter 1357. As if he didn't want to be entangled with Noah any longer, His Highness looked at Noah with unprecedented indifference. Although the aura on his body was fading little by little, the hostility did not decrease. Instead, it increased. Although it's very likely that the guy sealed here will wake up if I revive the game here, or even break the seal, it's not in line with my character if I don't use the chess piece in my hand. Let's start right away. After saying this, His Highness didn't give Noah any time to react and directly looked to his side. There, a figure suddenly flashed out without any warning. It was a playful and cute girl. Just like when he faced His Highness, Noah almost immediately recognized the girl's aura with his sensing ability. That aura was exactly the same as the other black-robed person who suddenly appeared beside His Highness at the end of the battle at No Name's base. It was similar to the aura of the other black-robed person who suddenly teleported His Highness away. That girl was Ling. However, in Ling's arms, there was a girl who seemed to have lost consciousness. Her whole body was powerless as she was hugged by Ling. That young girl had a head of dazzling golden hair that was as resplendent as the sun, and she wore a maid's uniform that was alternating between black and white. It was Letitia. Looking at the powerless Letitia lying in Ling's arms, Noah's face gradually darkened. His gaze towards Ling was shockingly cold. Wah! So scary. Ling seemed to be frightened by Noah's extremely cold gaze and took a few steps back with a stiff expression. That brother seems to be more difficult to deal with than I thought, Your Highness. I don't need you to tell me about this kind of thing. His Highness said expressionlessly. Ling, are you ready? Yes, I'm ready. Belle's cute face tensed up. But, Your Highness, are we really going to use it? It might break that guy's seal. I was a little hesitant at first, but now, there's no need to hesitate. His Highness said coldly. In any case, we've already planned to the end. If there's really no other way, then we'll just directly remove that guy's seal. There's no need to hesitate anymore. Since Your Highness says so. Ring fell silent for a moment before nodding. That's the only thing we can do. Hearing this, Noah had a bad premonition. Intuition told Noah. Now was the best time to take Letitia back. As soon as this thought appeared in Noah's mind, Noah chose to carry it out without any hesitation. Thus, in Noah's heart, the stone plate with the 10 patterns connected to it suddenly turned and pointed to the pattern of a divine bird spreading its wings. It was the incarnation of the phoenix. As long as he could enter the seraphic speed world and achieve the true meaning of lightning speed by shortening the movement time, he would definitely be able to seize back Letitia before His Highness and Belle could react. However, Belle was also a decisive person. After obtaining His Highness's permission, Belle no longer hesitated and chose to carry out the order. In the end, Noah was one step too late. In the sky above Huang Yen City, the sky suddenly trembled and was shrouded by a large dark cloud that suddenly appeared without any warning. Rumble. In the thick dark clouds, dense lightning began to move and dyed the sky above Huang Yen City into a flashing blue and white color. Noticing this abnormality, everyone in Huang Yen City raised their heads and looked at the sky. Including Noah. In the next second, a scene that did not exist in reality appeared in front of everyone. The dark sky that was covered by thick dark clouds suddenly split into two halves. Soon after, a huge head stretched out from the two halves of the sky. Everyone was dumbfounded as they looked at the head that was poking out from the split sky. Although Noah was not stunned, his pupils suddenly shrank to the size of a needle tip. What kind of head was that? In short, it was a huge dragon head. It was not the ferocious dragon head that was unique to the west, but the divine dragon head that was unique to the east. The size of such a dragon head was comparable to that of Huang Yan City below. It could even cover the sky and the sun. In the next moment, a pair of scarlet eyes suddenly opened on the huge dragon head that covered the sky and the sun. Roar, 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 roar. Everyone in Huang Yan City was shocked. The space was distorted and turned into a huge sound wave that attacked the city below like a storm. The terrifying roar reverberated between heaven and earth. At this moment, a terrifying pressure that was almost solid descended from the sky and shrouded the entire Huang Yan City. Under such pressure, above the dark sky, one could faintly see the divine dragon's head that covered the sky and the sun. A silhouette that looked like a castle slowly descended. A huge dragon and a castle. In the sky, the dreamy scene was reflected in the eyes of everyone in Huang Yan City. Everyone was frozen on the spot and could not move at all. However, Noah could understand their feelings. Staring at the huge dragon's head that covered the sky, Noah's voice seemed like it would disappear in the wind at any time as he uttered word by word. Pure-blooded, dragon species, yes. Pure-blooded dragon species. That huge dragon was one of the 3 strongest species in the box court. At this moment, a voice that sounded like pain and struggle lightly sounded and entered Noah's ears. Master. Hearing this voice, Noah trembled and turned his head abruptly to look in Belle's direction. Letitia, who was lying in Belle's arms powerlessly, exuded a strange light all over her body. She raised her head with difficulty and stared at Noah with a pair of wine-red eyes as she squeezed out such a sentence. Aim, for the 13th, son. Leaving behind such a sentence, Letitia completely turned into a ray of light, suddenly rushed into the sky, and violently shot towards the horizon. Noah could only watch as Letitia, who had turned into a ray of light, was swallowed up by the dragon's head that blotted out the sky. Roar, 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 roar. The giant dragon seemed to have gained life as it let out an even more violent roar, causing a terrifying sound wave to reverberate between heaven and earth. Inside, pieces of black parchment suddenly took shape and fell down like raindrops. Bestowed game name, SUNSWNCHRONOUSORBATIN VM Parikanji contestants view. All life forms caught in the beast belt. Note, when the beast belt disappears, the game will be suspended indefinitely. Conditions for the participant to lose: none, death will not be considered as a loss. Prohibited items on the participant's side: none. Participant punishment clause 1, a time limit will be set for all participants who have fought against the game leader. Participant punishment clause 2, the time limit will be reset every 10 days and will continue to cycle. Participant punishment clause 3, the punishment will be randomly selected from impalement, crucifixion, and burning. Participant punishment clause 4, the removal method will only be applied when the game is cracked and interrupted. Participant punishment clause 5, the death of the participant is not included in the removal conditions, and will be permanently punished. Organizers' victory conditions: none. Participants' victory conditions: 1. Kill the game leader, Demon King Dracula. Participants' victory conditions: 2. Kill the game leader, Letitia D. Cray. Participants' victory conditions: 3. Collect the shattered stars and offer the beast belt to the throne. Participants' victory conditions: 4. Follow the guidance of the beast belt to return to the throne in the correct form, and pierce the heart of the revolutionary leader who is bound by iron chains. Oath: respect the above content, based on glory, flag, and organizer's authority, host the bestowed game. Seal. Chapter 1358. Bestowed game name, SUNSWNCHRONUSORBATIN VM Parikanji contestant view. All life forms caught in the beast belt. Note, in the event that the beast belt disappears, the game will be suspended indefinitely. Contestant defeat conditions: none, death will not be regarded as defeat. Contestant prohibitions: none. Contestant penalty clause 1, a time limit will be set for all contestants who have fought with the game leader. Contestant penalty clause 2, the time limit will be reset every 10 days and will continue to cycle. Contestant penalty clause 3, the punishment will be randomly selected from impalement, crucifixion, and burning. Contestant Penalty Clause 4. The removal method will only be applied when the game has been cracked and interrupted. Contestant Penalty Clause 5. The death of the contestant is not included in the removal conditions and will be permanently punished. Host Victory Conditions. None. Contestant Victory Conditions. Kill the game leader Demon King Dracula. Contestant Victory Conditions. Kill the game leader Letitia D. Cray. Contestant Victory Conditions. Collect the shattered starry sky and offer the Beast Belt to the throne. Contestant Victory Conditions. Follow the correct form of the Beast Belt to return to the throne and pierce the chained heart of the revolutionary leader. Oath. Respect the above content, based on honor, flag, and host authority, host the bestowed game. Seal. It had to be said that the content of the game recorded in the pitch-black contract that fell from the sky was very absurd. Absurd to the point of being unreasonable. Especially the part that described the punishment clause. It was obviously emitting the most intense malice. Not only was there a time limit of 10 days, once the time limit was reached, the contestant would be randomly subjected to impalement, crucifixion, or burning. One of the 3 terrible punishments was not allowed to be removed even after death. It was like whipping a corpse, once every 10 days, and could only be removed after the game was cracked. This kind of malicious and twisted penalty clause was simply enough to arouse the anger of the heavens and the resentment of the people. As a game, it was impossible for such a punishment clause to exist. However, the organizer had given up on the possibility of winning, and also gave up on letting the contestants lose. In the end, there was no reward, no gain, and these angry punishment clauses were added into the game. This was a game that existed only for the sake of violence. In the end, either the organizer or the participant would die. There was no room for negotiation or compromise. Therefore, all the people who had obtained the contract documents in Brilliant Flame City turned pale in a split second. Their faces were full of terror. Noah, who was holding a pitch-black contract document that recorded the game's content, also lowered his head, letting the fringe on his forehead cover his expression. The contract stated that the leader of the game was Letitia. In that case, there was no need to guess who the organizer of this game was. Letitia once said. In the past, in order to avenge her clansmen who died in the civil strife, she once degenerated into a demon king and held a game that existed only for the sake of revenge. In the end, although No Name's former companions managed to free Letitia, they weren't able to crack Letitia's game. Instead, they used the method of indefinitely delaying the game as stated in the contract to separate Letitia from the game itself, sealing Letitia's game. Then, there was no need to explain the current situation. His Highness and Belle captured Letitia and used Letitia as a medium to unlock Letitia's sealed game, allowing this game that existed only for the sake of revenge to reappear in the world. From the beginning, His Highness and Belle had been scheming against Noah. They clearly knew that if the East, South, and North regions were attacked at the same time, the young ruler of the social class, Shadora, would be targeted and fall into a complete disadvantage. They also calculated that in the end, the only person who could change the situation by themselves was Noah. Therefore, they directly came to the North region. In order to wait for Noah's arrival. And also to wait for Letitia's arrival. The people called the Demon King Alliance, which meant that His Highness and Belle had long planned to use Letitia's game to attack the entire North region, and in the end, attack the East and South regions. Their goal shouldn't be hard to guess. Whether it was the East, South, or North region, the only ones that were attacked were the rulers of the social class and their substitutes. Then, the Demon King Alliance's goal should be to defeat the rulers of the social class and promote another person to become the ruler of the social class. Once the ruler of the social class became the ruler of the social class, they would be able to obtain the sovereignty of the sun. That was the goal of the Demon King Alliance. It was also the goal of His Highness and Belle. Noah lowered his hand and slowly let go of the pitch-black contract in his hand, allowing it to float to the ground. Then, Noah raised his feet and lowered his head, walking step by step towards His Highness and Belle. His Highness and Belle, who originally thought that Noah would be angry and attack, saw Noah silently walking towards them step by step, and an inexplicable tremble emerged in their hearts. Then, a soft voice entered His Highness and Belle's ears. "Fear those with wings. Both the evil and the powerful fear me because of my wings. My wings will bring you a curse, and the evil will not be able to hit me," the powerful voice echoed in the air, causing the trembling in His Highness and Belle's heart to suddenly reach its peak. "Your Highness." Belle couldn't help but shout. "Retreat." As soon as his voice subsided. Buzz. Noah, who was slowly walking in the direction of His Highness and Belle, was suddenly covered by a flash of light. His figure was like a mirage as he abruptly rushed out. With this dash, a series of human-shaped shadows flashed behind Noah's back. With bursts of light and shadow, Noah flashed in front of His Highness with unprecedented speed. His Highness only saw a blur before Noah's figure suddenly appeared in front of him. Bang! Accompanied by a muffled sound, a fist heavily bombarded His Highness' chest at an almost impossible speed. "Go!" His Highness groaned, and before he could even react, his whole body was directly sent flying upside down. However, Noah once again carried a burst of light and shadow. With a speed that couldn't be seen by the naked eye, like a flash of light, he instantly swept above His Highness, who was still flying upside down in midair. With a spin, as if he was diving down, his fist fiercely landed on His Highness' body. Bang! With this punch, His Highness, who was still flying upside down in midair, was smashed to the ground together with Noah, who had punched His Highness. Both of them smashed a crater into the ground. Pfft! His Highness finally spat out a mouthful of blood, and his mind was completely blank. What's wrong? What happened? Why did Noah's speed suddenly become so terrifying? This question had not been answered at all, but His Highness felt it. His collar was fiercely grabbed by a hand, and he was lifted up from the crater-like crater. At this moment, His Highness tried his best to open his blood-stained eyelids. Imprinted in His Highness' eyes was Noah's face. Straddling His Highness, Noah lifted His Highness' upper body from the gravel by the collar. He raised a fist, and his face was filled with a violent expression. "All evildoers, be afraid of my power. Now, I shall obtain the majesty of 10 mountains, the strength of 100 rivers, and the strength of 1,000 dragons. The majestic me shall raise the ferocious power of dragon slaying." In Noah's mind, the outline of the stone plate connected to the 10 patterns suddenly turned, and pointed to the incarnation of the Dragon Emperor. Then, Noah's raised fist fell down. Boom! In the roar, the ground seemed to collapse, and layer by layer, it sank down. Chapter 1359. At this moment, the entire brilliant flame capital seemed to have encountered an earthquake and began to tremble. Kacha kacha kacha. Accompanied by cracking sounds that made one's teeth ache, cracks spread out on the streets of Huangyan City. In the blink of an eye, they covered half of the entire city. In such a violent vibration, the fire dragon that had the ability to fly was another matter, but the giants were shaken to the ground one by one, causing a burst of miserable howls. As for the center of the cracks that almost covered half of the entire Huangyan City, the ground was sinking layer by layer as if it was collapsing. The scene was extremely shocking. The incarnation named Dragon Emperor was one of the more complicated effects in Noah's authority. Compared with the other incarnations that generally only had 1 or 2, or at most 2 or 3 effects, the Dragon Emperor, among the 10 incarnations, had a total of 5 effects. 1. Able to transform the body into the physique of a dragon and exercise the power comparable to a giant dragon. 2. Able to have the power of dragon kill that causes great damage to dragons. 3. Able to obtain the ability of air scale that has a defensive power comparable to a giant dragon's dragon scales. 4. Able to let people have a close combat ability that surpasses wildness and intuition. 5. Able to materialize the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear, and exercise the ability to multiply and transfer. However, although the abilities were complicated, in a nutshell, using this incarnation, Noah would instantly become a humanoid giant dragon that could multiply and transfer his own power and cause great damage to his own kind. After such a long time of self-enhancement of authority, the power of the current Dragon Emperor had far exceeded the past. Coupled with the blessing of Noah's LV5 ability value, the two were superimposed. With this punch, even a small hill could be smashed into pieces, right? Under the bombardment of such power, the ground with a diameter of more than 1,000 meters collapsed in the most direct way, causing the gravel in the sky to explode. It was as if the sky was falling and the earth was cracking. In the bursts of roars, the gravel fell in all directions. It was unknown how long this scene lasted. When everything calmed down, Noah's chest heaved up and down slightly in the center of the crater. With a face full of anger, he withdrew his fist that was deeply buried in the ground and lifted his other hand. Suddenly, in front of Noah, a pile of rubble was separated by Noah's movement. That was because Noah's hand was still holding onto the collar of a piece of clothing. With some strength, he pulled out the owner of the clothing that he had punched into the ground. That person was naturally His Highness. However, at this moment, His Highness was in a terrible state. Not only were his clothes tattered, but his skin was also cracked open. A large amount of blood continuously flowed out from His Highness's skin, dyeing His Highness into a bloody person. Not only that, but a large amount of blood was flowing out of His Highness' mouth. Even the corners of his eyes and nose were bleeding. It was simply too horrible to look at. Faced with such a miserable His Highness, Noah did not hide the anger in his heart and spoke coldly. "You're right, we're the same, but I exist as a human. Therefore, as a human, I'll clearly tell you, undoubtedly, that this is the price you have to pay for attacking my companion." With such a sentence, Noah lifted His Highness, who was covered in blood, with one hand and raised his other hand high again. "Go and repent in hell." Just as Noah's terrifying punch was about to land on His Highness' body again, a sharp sound of something breaking through the air was suddenly heard. A few short knives suddenly cut through the sky and flew over at an astonishing speed. It was as if they had pierced through space and shot toward Noah, who had raised his fist high up in the air. Feeling the sound of something breaking through the air behind him and the sharp weapons approaching at an extremely fast speed, Noah's hand movements paused slightly, and he glanced behind him. On his body, a burst of crimson-red air waves suddenly shook. It was a wave of air that resembled a crimson dragon-shaped armor. The air wave turned into a crimson dragon man, as if it had covered Noah's body. The sudden appearance of the dragon man caused ripples in the air. That was the air scale after fusing with the red Dragon Emperor's boosted gears balance breaker. Clang 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 clang. The few short knives that fell on the crimson air scale caused a crisp sound of collision, splashing a burst of sparks, and then they were all knocked away. After all, they were just ordinary short knives, and were not enough to break through Noah's air scale. However, the opponent did not want to cause harm to Noah, but wanted to stop Noah's attack. In the next moment, Noah felt the weight in his hands suddenly disappear. Her Highness, who had been completely covered in blood while being carried by Noah, suddenly disappeared. Seeing this, Noah's eyes flashed. He closed his eyes and expanded his senses. Unfortunately, His Highness's aura had long since disappeared. Even Ling had disappeared. Clearly, when Noah was about to deal the final blow to Her Highness, Belle used her mysterious grace to take Her Highness away. Moreover, the other party seemed to be fully aware of how dangerous Noah was. They immediately fled with His Highness, completely disappearing without a trace. Did he escape? Noah suppressed the anger in his heart and took a deep breath to calm himself down. "I will remember what happened today. Little brat who calls himself Your Highness, don't give me a chance to settle the score." After saying those words, Noah raised his head and looked at the sky. Roar, 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 roar. The gigantic dragon head that poked its head out from the split sky kept roaring at the blazing flame capital below. The sound waves turned into waves of wind that blew across the entire city like a storm. Noah cancelled the use of the Dragon Emperor avatar and flew towards the sky. When the war in Huang Flame's city was escalating, a pair of red jade-like eyes suddenly opened in the depth of a volcano in Huang Flame's city where even light and sound couldn't reach. What kind of eyes were those? In terms of appearance, it could be likened to a red bead embedded in a broken wall. However, this pair of red jade-like eyes contained a gaze that no one could understand. It was a gaze that could not be described as ruthless. It was an expression that could not be described as ferocious. If one had to find a word to describe this expression, there was only one word. Terror. It was a gaze that could make an ordinary person's heart explode with the most primitive terror the moment they saw it. The owner of this pair of eyes slowly raised his head and looked towards the pitch-black sky, as if he could see the conflict on the ground far away. Along with this action of raising its head, the sound of chains clanging echoed in the air. That was natural. Because the thick and somewhat unnecessary iron chains were wrapped around its limbs and penetrated them, causing its limbs to be sewn into the rock wall. Although there was no blood, anyone who saw this scene would believe that the iron chain that was so tight that it had sunk into the flesh would bring indescribable pain to it, right? However, that kind of thing was of no importance to it. Compared to the physical pain, it could not accept the fact that it could not bring despair and terror to the world. However, that was not important. As if it felt something, it opened its mouth and revealed its sharp and terrifying fangs. He had comprehended. Perhaps it was not far from seeing the light of day again. It's time to welcome the final trial, me, human heroes. The voice kept echoing and did not calm down for a long time. Chapter 1360. Whoosh. Withstanding the whistling atmosphere, Noah's body turned into a ray of light and soared into the sky. In the blink of an eye, he arrived high in the sky and looked at the horizon. Roar, 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 roar. The huge dragon head that peeked out from the sky that had been split into two was still roaring. Just this alone had formed a storm that was comparable to a disaster, bathing the entire blazing flame capital in the violent storm. It seemed like it could be blown away at any time, and it was on the verge of collapse. Nobody knew whether it was disdain or deliberate, but the huge dragon's head didn't seem to have any intention of charging down from the clouds. It was only roaring there. If the huge dragon really wanted to attack Raging Flame Capital, then it only needed to charge toward Raging Flame Capital and Raging Flame Capital would be turned into ashes. After all, just the head of the huge dragon was already comparable to the size of an entire city. Then, how big was the body of the huge dragon that was still in the clouds? Just thinking about it was enough to make people tremble. If that was the case, the people in Raging Flame Capital should rejoice. Rejoice that the huge dragon didn't attack Raging Flame Capital. However, it shouldn't be that the huge dragon didn't want to attack. Instead, it should be that it didn't want to attack for the time being. Noah could tell. Although that huge dragon was a pure-blooded dragon species, it didn't have any intelligence or intelligence. Speaking of which, why would a pure-blooded dragon species appear in Letitia's game? Why would Letitia be swallowed by that huge dragon? I still don't know the reason behind these. Noah raised his head and looked at the huge dragon that was letting out a world-shaking roar. His eyes were filled with uncertainty. Could it be that the main body of that huge dragon is actually, just when Noah had some guesses in his heart, another figure flew out from Raging Flame Capital. Accompanied by a burst of black wind, the figure arrived beside Noah. Who else could it be other than Pest? Pest was holding the pitch-black contract in her hand. Her complexion was pale as she looked at the huge dragon that covered the sky. Then, she turned her gaze and looked at Noah. Her voice was hoarse as she spoke. Has Letitia's game been restarted? It would appear that Pest also knew about the matter regarding Letitia. Noah did not answer Pest's question. Instead, he stared at the roaring dragon and spoke in a low voice. How's the situation in Glorious Flame Capital? Shadora and Mandela seem to have defeated the demon king controlling the giant tribe. They have split up to deal with the giants wreaking havoc in the city. Pest was silent for a moment before answering truthfully. In addition, Letitia and I have defeated many giants before this. The defeat of the giants is only a matter of time. Hearing this, Noah stared at the gigantic dragon that covered the sky and said. In other words, all that's left is to solve Letitia's problem, right? That's right, Pest answered subconsciously. Then, she seemed to have realized something and was shocked. Do you want to fight that pure-blooded dragon? If that was the case, Pest could not help but feel astonished. That was a pure-blooded dragon, an existence known as one of the 3 most powerful races. Conservatively speaking, an existence like that was at the apex of the 4-digit number. It might even be a terrifying existence in the 3-digit number. Fight against such an existence? Ignoring everything else, if Pest were to fight against such an existence, even if she possessed the body of a god, she would still be torn to pieces in an instant. She would be deader than dead. How could one possibly fight against such an existence? Of course, with the strength that Noah had displayed earlier, he might really be able to fight against that gigantic dragon. However, in Pest's opinion, there was no solution more foolish than directly fighting against the strongest species right from the start. The urgent matter at hand was not to think about how to fight against such an existence. Instead, it was to take advantage of the fact that the other party had yet to launch an attack to defeat the giant tribe and then think of a way to solve the game. Since the gigantic dragon appeared together with the game that Letitia held, the gigantic dragon should also disappear when the game was solved. That was the most suitable method for now. Naturally, Noah understood that. However, at a time when he still did not know how Letitia was doing, leisurely sitting down and thinking about how to solve the game's puzzle was something that Noah could not do. At the very least, he should confirm whether Letitia was doing well or not. Thinking up to this point, Noah turned his gaze and looked in another direction. It was a castle floating in midair above the gigantic dragon. A castle? Noah's eyes flickered. Could that be the ancient city of the vampires? Noah had heard Letitia mention before that before the internal strife of the vampires began, the vampires known as the Knights of the Box all lived in a floating castle. After Letitia degenerated into a demon king, she held the most ferocious revenge game and annihilated all the traitors that started the internal strife. After that, the castle was reduced to a demonic realm that was solely occupied by Letitia, known as the last king of the vampires. It was feared by the people of the box. In other words, before Letitia was separated from the game, Letitia had been living in the floating vampire castle. Later on, when Letitia was separated from the game, that castle was sealed together with the game. Now, as the game restarted, that ancient vampire castle seemed to have been resummoned. In that case, is it very possible that Letitia is up there? Noah immediately came to a decision. Pest, let's go check out the castle. A castle? Pest looked to the floating castle and sighed. Understood. After he finished saying those words, Noah turned into a ray of light. As for Pest, she turned into a burst of black wind and began to fly toward the direction of the floating ancient castle. Rumble. The closer they got to the dark clouds, the more violent the lightning that flashed back and forth in the clouds. The deafening sound of thunder continuously reverberated in the surroundings, causing pain in the eardrums of those who heard it. Noah and Pest deliberately took a detour around the enormous dragon. First, they flew into the thick clouds at a distance away from the enormous dragon. Then, they made a turn and flew toward the ancient castle floating above the enormous dragon. Gradually, as Noah and Pest approached the ancient castle, it grew bigger and bigger. This proved that Noah and Pest were rapidly approaching the location of the ancient castle. If this were to continue, the two of them should be able to enter the vampire castle soon. That is, if nothing were to stop them. Noah, who was flying toward the direction of the castle, suddenly sensed something. His eyes narrowed and he came to a stop. Pest immediately stopped as well. She asked in confusion. What's wrong? Noah did not say anything. He merely looked in the direction of the ancient castle, leading Pest's gaze to follow him. Only at this moment did Pest notice something. Not far from the vampire's castle, a strange black dot had appeared. It was a completely pitch-black shadow that seemed to be able to absorb all light. Like a swamp, it was wriggling non-stop and changing its appearance. That's right. It was a shadow. Shrinking, changing, expanding. It was a shadow that was repeating these actions non-stop. It was like a malicious spirit that had crawled up from the dark abyss. Darkness and formless killing intent surged all over its body. Pest spoke in astonishment when she saw that shadow. What is that? Not long after, she obtained the answer to her question. Rumble. Thunder continued to rise and fall in the sky. With the rumbling thunder as the background, the pitch-black shadow took the form of a human. It quietly stood before the floating castle and entered Noah and Pest's line of sight. A coat that gave off the air of a ruler was fluttering in the wind. The dazzling lightning illuminated the long golden hair that was as bright as sunlight. Pest's face stiffened when she saw that figure. Noah muttered softly as he stared at the figure. Letitia. Chapter 1361. Letitia. Seeing the young girl floating before the vampire's ancient castle, Pest's face was filled with doubt, confusion, and disbelief. Pest could not be blamed for acting this way. The reason for that was because, compared to the Letitia's appearance in Pest's memories, the current Letitia's appearance had completely changed. No. To be more exact, it would be more accurate to say that her appearance had changed. Not only was she no longer wearing the blue and white maid uniform, but even her age had changed enormously. If the Letitia Pest knew was a young girl of the same age as herself, then the Letitia before her was at least 17 or 18 years old. The adorable young girl's appearance had changed into a woman emitting a bewitching aura. Her beautiful waist-length golden hair no longer had that lovely ribbon around it. Instead, it flowed down her soft waist like a waterfall. Such a dramatic change made it impossible for one to associate it with the adorable Letitia. However, the waist-length golden hair, deep red eyes and stern expression all possessed Letitia's shadow. In other words, it was the feeling of Letitia suddenly becoming an adult. Half an hour ago, the maid who could be considered to be of the same age as Pest had now transformed into such a mature and bewitching appearance. It was no wonder Pest would react in such a manner. Only Noah knew that the mature and bewitching appearance was Letitia's true appearance. Her adorable and young appearance was merely another one of Letitia's appearances in order to accumulate power and avoid unnecessary consumption of power. Only when Letitia revealed this mature and bewitching appearance would she unleash her full strength in battle. In other words, the current Letitia was in a state where she was prepared to unleash her full strength at any moment. Something's wrong. Noah suddenly spoke. She's not Letitia. That's right. The person with Letitia's appearance was not Letitia herself. Shadow. That's Letitia's shadow. Dragon's shadow. That was the name of that shadow. The shadow called Dragon's Shadow was actually Letitia's grace. This grace was capable of a myriad of changes. Furthermore, it was very powerful. After the godhead was taken away, this gift became incomplete. Even so, with the help of the Dragon's Shadow, Letitia was still able to stand firmly at the bottom of the 5 digits. She was not reduced to a small fry at the bottom. When the Dragon's Shadow was in its complete state and she still possessed the divinity, Letitia even became a full-fledged ruler and was given a 4-digit position. One could imagine how powerful this gift was. Although they did not know what was going on, Letitia's Dragon's Shadow had appeared in Letitia's form. She stood in front of Noah and Pest. A pair of emotionless and cold crimson eyes stared at Noah and Pest. The gift known as Dragon's Shadow was in Letitia's form. She slowly raised a hand to the front. Wang. In the next moment, following an intense wave of energy fluctuations, a pitch-black shadow spread out from Letitia's body like a tide. Amidst the trembling sounds, the expanding shadows gradually turned into sharp weapons. There were sabers, swords, spears, halberds, and all sorts of other forms. They seemed to have emerged from the spatial fluctuations, and their sharp points were aimed at Noah and Pest. That scene was simply like a pitch-black gate of Babylon. Soon after, the sharp weapons formed by the shadows shot out explosively. They covered the sky and covered the earth as they shot toward Noah and Pest. Their speed was simply faster than a bullet. Pest's expression changed. Even Noah's eyes narrowed. Immediately after, the master and servant duo kicked the air at the same time and rapidly retreated backward. However, the rain of weapons easily caught up to the two of them. Seeing the sharp points of the pitch-black weapons gradually enlarging in his eyes, Noah did not hesitate in the slightest. On his arm, the magic patterns that represented enhanced magic spread out. His powerful fist heavily smashed forward. Clang! Following the sound of metal colliding with metal, one of the pitch-black weapons was sent flying by Noah's fist. Clang! 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 In the next second, amidst a series of crisp sounds, the attacking pitch-black weapons were smashed away by Noah's fist one after another. They scattered into black spots all over the sky and regrouped in the direction of Letitia's shadow. Only after all the weapons were sent flying did Noah stop and float in midair. Sensing that his arms had become slightly numb from the collision just now, even Noah couldn't help but be astonished. What great power! Regardless of whether it was power or speed, the weapons formed by the dragon's shadow were extremely astonishing. That power was definitely not at the bottom of the 5-digit level. In fact, it didn't even seem like the power of a 5-digit level. Pest clearly had the same feeling. She stared intently at Letitia's shadow in front of her and spoke somewhat nervously. "Be careful. That shadow has the aura of a divinity." Those words caused Noah's heart to tremble. Divinity? Letitia's shadow has a divinity? Didn't that mean that at this very moment, Noah was facing the true power of Letitia when she was at her peak and was known as the Demon King? So that's how it is. Not only did Letitia release the sealed game, Letitia's original divinity was also prepared, allowing Letitia to recover to her peak strength? Noah's mood was mixed with joy and worry. He was happy because Letitia's divinity that had been stripped away appeared before him. He was worried because the timing of the divinity's return was simply too terrible. If that was truly the dragon's shadow that possessed Letitia's divinity, then it would mean that the enemy Noah and Pest were facing was a 4-digit level Demon King. A pure-blooded Demon King that had once commanded the entire vampire race that protected the order of the court. A pure-blooded Demon King that had once held the position of the ruler of the entire hierarchy and established the hierarchy system. A 4-digit level Demon King, a pure-blooded dragon, a vicious game that exists only for the sake of revenge. Noah couldn't help but smile bitterly. "Is this your true power, Letitia?" As if to verify Noah's thoughts, the pitch-black sharp blades that blotted out the sky and covered the earth once again converged and took form. Like a violent storm, the blades cut through space and enveloped Noah and Pest amidst sharp sonic booms. Buzz, however, at this moment, water-like golden ripples began to undulate around Noah. Within the ripples, blades, swords, spears, halberds and various other treasures that were undoubtedly much more gorgeous and dazzling compared to the pitch-black weapons emerged from the ripples. They turned into flashes of light and shot toward the incoming rain of pitch-black weapons. Clang, 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 clang. Immediately, in the dark cloud-filled sky, the gorgeous and dazzling treasures collided with the monotonous pitch-black treasures repeatedly. Sounds of metal colliding were heard and sparks filled the entire sky. "Pest!" Noah called out to Pest, who was beside him. "Stay here and take care of Letitia's shadow." "Huh?" Pest was startled. "You want me to take care of Letitia's shadow?" There's nothing to be surprised about. Although that shadow possesses Letitia's divinity, it doesn't seem to possess any intelligence. It only knows how to launch simple attacks. With your 5-digit level divine power, it won't be hard for you to tangle with her, said Noah. I don't have time to waste here. Thus, I'll leave this place to you. Remember, you are not allowed to scatter Letitia's shadow. Otherwise, her divinity will likely disappear. After saying those words, Noah ignored the stupefied Pest and turned into a ray of light that flew toward the castle. Pest was unable to stop him in time. She could only look on helplessly as the pitch-black sharp blades shot toward her. As if giving up on herself, she raised a black wind. It's my misfortune to have a master like you. Chapter 1362. Whoosh. The cold wind was like a sharp blade, blowing through the castle in midair. It was a castle full of lonely air and thick dust. The castle was almost entirely made of stone. Even under the attack of the wind, the buildings inside were able to remain unshaken. Even the streets were not affected by the wind, almost maintaining their original appearance. In short, it was a majestic city. Unfortunately, there wasn't a single person in such a city, causing the air to be deathly still. If one walked along the main road from the direction of the city gate, then one would finally arrive at the Imperial Throne Hall. In the Imperial Throne Hall, there was a throne. At this time, a young girl was quietly sitting on the throne, as if she was taking a nap. The quiet atmosphere pervaded around her, making the scene seem unusually beautiful. The one sitting on the throne was naturally Letitia. The clothes on her body were different from the maid clothes she wore when she was forcibly taken away. She had changed into a black dress. Her hands and feet were chained to the throne. She was treated like a prisoner, but unexpectedly, there was a strange sense of beauty. His shiny golden hair reflected a resplendent luster, causing one's heart to surge with emotion. This extraordinarily cute-looking girl, at this moment, let her consciousness wander in a hazy state, as if she was floating in the sea of dreams, drifting with the waves. If there were no external factors interfering, the girl would probably continue to sleep, right? Until a call sounded. Letitia. Letitia. Letitia, for Letitia, that was a very familiar voice. If one had to say why, it would be because the other person's identity, to Letitia, was very special. Although she was once reduced to an object because of the Demon King's attack, it must be said here that the girl named Letitia was not only a full-power ruler, but also the legitimate heir to the throne of the vampire clan. Her identity was extremely noble, and it would not be an exaggeration to say that she was the princess of the Box Court. Even after falling to the Demon King, Letitia was still known by the people of the Box Court as the Vampire King, Dracula, and other famous titles. It could be said that she was very famous. This kind of Letitia had never bowed her head in front of anyone before. The only exception was the unfathomable man who had recently broken into Letitia's life and saved her, who had been reduced to an object. For this man, Letitia was only grateful at first, and called him master because of their relationship. As the other party's unfathomable side became more and more obvious, Letitia's pure gratitude gradually transitioned into true admiration, respect, and even reverence. She began to unconsciously recognize the identity of master. Therefore, it must be explained here. Since ancient times, there was only one person who could make Letitia call him master. Thus, to Letitia, how could the other person's voice not special, and not familiar? At that moment, Letitia desperately whipped her hazy consciousness and woke up from her slumber. As soon as she opened her eyes, Letitia, 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 and Letitia, 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 Letitia. Letitia, master? Letitia used her remaining hazy consciousness to observe her surroundings. It wasn't until she realized where she was that she shuddered and recalled everything that had happened. So that's how it is. Letitia said softly with a complicated expression. Have I become the Demon King again? Although it was not voluntary, for Letitia, this fact was still a shock. After all, the reason why Letitia became the Demon King was not honorable at all. She became the Demon King for revenge. She held such a vicious game for revenge. All of this was a past that Letitia could not bear to look back on. After becoming the host of the game again, Letitia understood the current situation in an instant. Because of the lack of rationality and Letitia's reluctance to hold the game again, the dragon did not take action and was still observing. Letitia's shadow seemed to have noticed an intruder, and while Letitia was asleep, it automatically attacked the enemy. As for the fact that the divinity that Letitia originally possessed was taken by the shadow, Letitia was more or less surprised. Due to the return of the divinity, Letitia's, dragon's shadow, was restored, and her power also returned to its peak. If it were any other time, this would definitely be something to be happy about. However, now, the return of the divinity only increased the difficulty of Letitia's game for others. This was not a good thing for Letitia. How do you feel? Noah just looked at Letitia, who had a complicated expression, and asked softly. Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? If I can feel uncomfortable, then maybe it's a good thing. Letitia laughed bitterly. Master should have noticed it too, right? The current me is not the real me. Looking closely, Letitia's figure did seem a little illusory. This was because the body on the throne was just a shadow with Letitia's consciousness. Noah looked straight at Letitia's bitter expression and sighed. This is just a projection of your consciousness. Your real body should have turned into that dragon by now, right? Master really noticed it. Letitia's expression became even more bitter. Yes, the dragon outside is my original body. No, it should be said that I used the Ophiuchus's sun sovereign and my own body as a medium to summon the dragon. In other words, the pure-blooded dragon outside was transformed into Letitia using the Ophiuchus's sun sovereign as a medium. A long time ago, in order to suppress the vampires who caused internal strife, I used the Ophiuchus's sun sovereign and my own body as a medium to transform into the dragon. I launched an extremely vicious game of bestowment and took revenge on my own kind. Letitia shook her head. Only by transforming into the strongest species of the box court did I have the ability to fight against almost half of the vampires by myself. I even wandered in the box court for an extremely long time, wreaking havoc as the Demon King until today. That's already in the past, right? Noah couldn't help but interject. Now, you don't want to endanger the box court as the Demon King anymore, right? So, the so-called involuntary is probably referring to my current state, right? Letitia met Noah's gaze. Now, I only hope that Master can clear this cruel game and give me relief. Hearing this, Noah was silent. Looking at Letitia's resolute and awe-inspiring face, Noah spoke word by word. But, clearing the game means that you must die, right? Letitia's breath stopped and she couldn't say anything. And this undoubtedly confirmed Noah's words. Letitia's game had 4 victory conditions. If the contestant wanted to clear the game, they must achieve one of the 4 victory conditions. Contestant victory condition 1, kill the game leader, Demon King Dracula. Contestant victory condition 2, kill the game leader, Letitia D. Cray. Contestant victory condition 3, collect the shattered starry sky and offer the beast belt to the throne. Contestant victory condition 4, follow the guidance of the beast belt to return to the throne in the correct way and shoot through the chained revolutionary leader's heart. The first and second victory conditions were to kill Letitia. And from Letitia's chained body on the throne, it could be seen that the chained revolutionary leader, in the 4th victory condition, was also referring to her. As for the 3rd victory condition, Noah estimated that if it was achieved, it would also cause Letitia to lose her life. Only by completely blocking her escape route, Letitia's impossible punishment clause in the game could be established. So, no matter which victory condition was achieved, in the end, Letitia had to die. Chapter 1363. Death. As long as they cleared the game called Sun Synchronous Orbit in Vampire King, Letitia would die. Although it was cruel, this was the reality. Of course, death was not a particularly serious consequence for Noah or Letitia. The reason why the former had this understanding was because even if Letitia died, he could use the precious resurrection item from the previous world to resurrect Letitia. Although Letitia's level could reach up to 4 digits, low-level resurrection items were not effective on her. Noah's treasure house did not only have low-level resurrection items, there were also some high-level resurrection items. What's more, Noah still had some of the most precious high-level resurrection items. Using such a resurrection item, he could resurrect a designated person unconditionally without any restrictions. Even if the body, spirit, and even soul were annihilated, using the high-level resurrection item, he could still resurrect. If there must be a limit, it was that this high-level resurrection item, under normal circumstances, was not only the most precious one-time consumable item, but it could only resurrect a person unconditionally. However, if Letitia really died, then no matter what, Noah would not be stingy with such a high-level resurrection item. As for Letitia, she didn't take death seriously at all. If death could free her from the position of the Demon King, then Letitia did not mind abandoning her life that had lived for countless years. And Noah also saw this point. Noah stared straight at Letitia's pair of exceptionally beautiful crimson eyes as he spoke in an extremely serious tone. "I won't allow you to underestimate your life." Letitia was stunned. "Listen carefully." Noah stared straight at Letitia's stunned face as he enunciated each and every word clearly. "I am your master, and you have personally admitted that you are my possession. In that case, without my permission, you are absolutely not allowed to throw away this life that belongs to me." These unquestionable words made Letitia's heart uncontrollably shake. "Do you know?" Noah said in a voice that contained strong emotions. "The thing I hate the most is people who underestimate life." After saying that, Noah stood up and turned around. With his back facing Letitia, he slowly walked in the direction of the door. Looking at Noah's gradually disappearing back, Letitia could not help but speak. "You. Where are you going?" "Of course I'm going to your place." Noah's voice slowly echoed. "Whether you are a vampire or a dragon, this time, let me tell you what kind of punishment you will receive if you ignore your master's thoughts." After leaving this sentence, Noah's figure disappeared from Letitia's sight. Letitia could only stare blankly in the direction where Noah had left. In her heart, the idea of ending things with death began to gradually change. If it's master, maybe there is a way. Bang. In the distant horizon, in front of the vampire's ancient castle, the pitch-black wave collided with the pitch-black storm. It was as if neither side was willing to give up on the other. It was also as if they were two monstrous waves that gave rise to a sky-shaking loud noise and a berserk impact. The surrounding pitch-black clouds were all dispersed. The shadow that carried Letitia's godhead floated in midair as if it was looking down on everything. Pitch-black shadows unceasingly surged out from its body, forming surging black waves. Amidst the rumbling sounds, the black waves covered the sky and covered the earth as they surged forward. Opposite the shadow, Pest's blue and white-made uniform had unknowingly changed into the black and white patterned dress. She was also wearing a pair of snow boots. Her body was also surging with a pitch-black substance. It was a black wind that could bring about life and death. With a whistling sound, she also charged forward. Boom! The black waves and the black wind collided once again in the distant horizon. In an instant, the loud noise caused by the collision even covered the continuous rumbling of thunder in the surroundings. It gave rise to astonishing shock waves. Traces of pitch-black luster mixed with it spread out in all directions. The queen of the vampire controlling the pitch-black shadow. The god of the Black Death controlling the pitch-black wind and waves. The two young ladies, who stood at the top of their species in every sense of the word, constantly turned their powers into physical collisions, causing deafening explosions to resound in the dark sky, causing the atmosphere to become chaotic. At first glance, it appeared that Letitia and Pest were evenly matched. In reality, in terms of strength, Letitia was superior to Pest. The race known as the vampire was actually a race that was born from pure-blooded dragons. Pure-blooded dragons were life forms that were born from the sudden gathering of pure energy. If a pure-blooded dragon like that were to undergo parthenogenesis, the new life form that was born would also be a pure-blooded dragon. However, if a pure-blooded dragon were to mate with a mutant, it would give birth to a subspecies of dragon. Thus, according to speculation, it was very possible that the vampires were the descendants of a pure-blooded dragon after a pure-blooded dragon mated with a mutant. After a long period of time, the vampires evolved into the pure-blooded dragon race. This was something that could be seen from the fact that Letitia was known as the Demon King Dracula. After all, Dracula was a very famous vampire. However, according to the historical records, Dracula was a male. He was not related to Letitia at all. Thus, the reason why Letitia was known as Dracula was because Dracula was known as Draculia. In other words, Dracula was the son of the dragon. Because of this, Letitia was known as the Demon King Dracula after she became the Demon King. As for the grace of the dragon's shadow, it was the shadow of the dragon that the vampires believed in. From this, one could imagine exactly how high the grade of the grace of a pure-blooded dragon was. Only by possessing this grace of the dragon's shadow and the power of her divine spark was Letitia able to reach 4 digits. In terms of pure strength, even though Pest was a deity and was at the peak of 5 digits, she was still no match for Letitia. Unfortunately, it is really as that guy said. You only know how to use simple attacks. You are simply unable to unleash the true power of 4 digits. Pest turned the wind of death into a rapidly spinning pitch-black tornado. Like a drill, the tornado shot toward Letitia. If this is the case, it would be one thing if you were in existence at the peak of 5 digits. However, as a deity at the peak of 5 digits, I am still able to fight against you. Like a berserk tornado, the wind of death streaked across the sky and shot straight toward Letitia. Facing this attack, Letitia's expression remained unchanged. She raised her hand, and the surrounding shadows started to tremble. They started to frantically spin in the air. Not long afterward, they turned into a pitch-black tornado. Like a black python that could devour heaven and earth, the tornado twisted and faced the incoming wind of death. Rumble. The pitch-black tornado collided with the wind and waves. Like a meteorite colliding with earth, it gave rise to a rumble much louder than any of the previous collisions. The berserk shockwave spread in all directions and dispersed the surrounding black clouds. If this were to continue, the battle would likely continue to be in a stalemate. It was mainly because of Noah's instructions that Pest did not attack Letitia to death. Otherwise, with the overly simple movement pattern of the dragon's shadow, Pest would still be able to find an opportunity to kill Letitia. At the moment when Letitia and Pest were locked in a stalemate, a ray of light flew out from the vampire's ancient castle. Sensing that ray of light, Pest's movements turned sluggish for a moment. This sluggishness caused the attention of Letitia's shadow to be completely captured by the ray of light flying out from the ancient castle. Buzz! Immediately, the black shadows that filled the sky turned into sharp weapons and shot toward the ray of light. Chapter 1364. Whoosh! The pitch-black martial tools formed from pure shadow streaked through the air. Amidst sharp sonic booms, they shot toward the ray of light flying out from the vampire's ancient castle. Seeing this scene, Pest's heart tightened. She subconsciously cried out, "That's right. Be careful." At practically the instant this voice sounded, the ray of light flying out from the vampire's ancient castle stopped. Then, it spoke in a slightly furious voice. "Stop right there." Those words actually turned into tangible ripples. Carrying extremely dense power, they slowly reverberated through the air like ripples on the surface of a lake. The ripple-like power swept through the air. It also swept through the pitch-black martial tools formed from pure shadows that were shooting toward the ray of light from every direction. Right at this moment, it was as if the entire space had frozen. The pitch-black martial tools that were shooting out like bullets suddenly stopped in midair. Soon after, the voice that carried a little anger sounded once again. "Return." As if they were soldiers that had received an order, the pitch-black martial tools exploded and returned to their shadows. Like streams of liquid, they flew back through the air and returned to the location of Letitia's shadow, entering her body. Such an inconceivable scene caused Pest's eyes to widen. Not to mention Pest, even Letitia, who was formed from the dragon's shadow, seemed to have crashed. Her entire body froze in place. Buzz! In the next second, several profound runes suddenly appeared around Letitia's shadow. They blossomed with dazzling radiance. The radiance turned into a pitch-black sphere that completely enveloped Letitia's shadow. Then, the sphere began to shrink. Not long after, it shrunk to the size of a palm. Then, it flew toward a certain direction and landed on a hand. Immediately afterward, the palm-sized pitch-black sphere was tossed toward Pest. Pest subconsciously caught it in her hand. "I'll leave it to you for safekeeping. Don't lose it." After leaving this sentence, Lu Guang once again flew out and shot in the direction of the giant dragon. Seeing the ray of light that was getting farther and farther away in her field of vision, then looking at the pitch-black sphere in her hand, Pest lowered her head in dejection. She wanted to cry but had no tears. Why did I work so hard? On the other side, Noah, who had turned into a ray of light, looked at the dragon head that was extending its head from the split sky. Intense radiance flickered in his eyes. Roar! 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 As if sensing some sort of threat, the dragon finally stopped roaring at the capital of raging flames below. It abruptly turned its head and let out an extremely resounding roar toward Noah's direction. This roar made the entire world seem to tremble at this moment, trembling slightly. Whoosh! Following a terrifying whistling sound, the dragon's tail. That tail was so enormous that one couldn't see the end of it. It carried a terrifying power. And ferociously swept toward Noah's direction. This was the first time the dragon had finally launched an attack. As for this attack, it was as if the entire sky had collapsed. The inconceivably enormous dragon's tail pressed down heavily. Wherever it passed, the air beneath the dragon's tail would explode. It was so terrifying. Noah narrowed his eyes and stopped his flying figure. Bang! Resplendent and berserk golden waves of air suddenly surged out from his body and pervaded the entire world. The giant that blots out the sky is supporting the world with his hand. I will allow this divine power to flow into my body. From now on, I will display the ultimate power that no one can match. In Noah's heart, the outline of the stone plate with 10 patterns connected to it suddenly turned and pointed toward the giant. At this instant, a huge golden silhouette rose from Noah's body. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a phantom-like giant. Facing the dragon's tail that was terrifyingly powerful, it raised its hand that was as large as a mountain. Boom! When the gigantic dragon tail that blotted out the sky landed heavily on the palms of the giant that also blotted out the sky, a terrifying impact sound and violent wind immediately erupted. It shook the entire space until it was distorted, and the lightning and thunder in the dense clouds were shaken to the point that they completely dissipated. In the terrifying impact and loud sound, the phantom-like golden giant was shaken and fell down. The huge dragon's tail was shaken back and stopped its attack. Just by relying on that attack, the giant dragon definitely had the ability to easily defeat reverse 16 knights and His Highness, whose physical strength was so strong that it was against the rules. If it had been the 16 knights and His Highness who had taken that blow, they would have been injured long ago, right? However, the power that the incarnation of the giant possessed was said to be able to support the sky. This statement might be exaggerated, but even if it was exaggerated, one could still see the terrifying divine power that the incarnation of the giant could display from this description. Therefore, when the attack of the giant dragon was blocked and the huge dragon's tail was shaken back, the phantom-like giant suddenly turned into a golden light. It swept in front of the dragon's tail like lightning, and fiercely punched out with an unbelievably huge fist. Bang 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 bang. This punch caused a terrifying explosion to form under the fist. Carrying such an astonishing power, the phantom giant's fist fiercely hit the dragon's tail. Boom! Accompanied by a sky-shaking impact sound, the phantom giant's fist mercilessly shattered the dragon's scales on the dragon's tail, causing blood to splatter out. Ao 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 ao. The roar of the giant dragon suddenly turned into a painful howl. Obviously, this attack still caused some damage to the giant dragon. And this attack also thoroughly aroused the ferocity of the giant dragon. Who? It was still that terrifying whistling sound. Under the momentum of the explosion, some of the scales on the dragon's huge tail were shattered, and it heavily slammed into the giant's phantom. Boom! In the muffled explosion, the astonishing impact exploded in front of the phantom giant's chest, causing the phantom giant to be heavily hit. It was like a rubber ball that was slapped away, and under the terrifying force, it was violently pushed back. In the phantom giant, Noah's throat inevitably squeezed out a muffled groan, but he resisted the terrible impact, and tried his best to control the phantom giant's body. Therefore, before the phantom giant was violently pushed back, it suddenly stretched out its hands and hugged the dragon's tail. Giant that blots out the sky, show your unparalleled divine power, and destroy the creatures that are your enemies, the the new spirit of the language turned the surging golden divine power into a substantial power, and poured into the phantom giant's body. At this moment, the phantom giant's body seemed to have solidified a lot. It squeezed out all the power in its body, and tried its best to hold the giant dragon's tail tightly. The strength caused the phantom giant's hands to sink into the flesh of the dragon's tail, and the dragon's tail was forcefully squeezed, causing the surrounding scales to shatter again. Ao 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 ao. The giant dragon let out a painful howl. Hiya hiya. Noah let out a roar. The giant phantom exerted its strength, twisted its body, and pulled the giant dragon out of the split sky. Then, it threw the giant dragon down heavily. Instantly, the giant dragon turned into an unprecedentedly huge meteorite, and fell from the sky. It went against the strong wind, and it rubbed against the air, and smashed into a mountain not far away from Huangyan City. Boom! For a period of time, the earth trembled, the mountain swayed, and the gigantic body of the giant dragon fell with a bang, causing the earth to tremble violently at that moment. It was as if an earthquake of the highest magnitude had occurred, causing cracks that were as thick as abysses to continuously spread out from the spot where it landed. Chapter 1365. Rumble. The earth continued to shake. Kacha kacha kacha. Cracks that were as deep as the abyss began to spread between the mountains. Ao 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 ao. The giant dragon that was pulled down from the sky and smashed heavily onto the ground, causing the earth to tremble and mountains to shake. It let out a roar that seemed to be both painful and furious, and struggled to get up. However, at this moment, golden ripples began to appear from the space around the giant dragon. In the blink of an eye, the ripples were densely packed around the giant dragon. Within the ripples, silver chains that were not even as thin as a strand of hair, but had golden light flowing through them, flew out and coiled around the giant dragon. In the end, the giant dragon's huge body restricted its movements. Before it could struggle to get up, the silver chains that were flowing with golden light wrapped around the giant dragon's body layer by layer, binding the giant dragon. However, this level of binding was nothing to the giant dragon, right? After all, even if it wrapped around the giant dragon's body, the chains were only as thin as a strand of hair. They were not enough to bind the giant dragon. As long as the giant dragon gently moved its body, the chains that were wrapped around its body would break apart. There was no suspense. That was to be expected. The Enkidu, a noble artifact, was a natural enemy to those who possessed divinity. On the contrary, for an existence that did not have divinity, the Enkidu relic was only a slightly harder chain. The giant dragon was a pure-blooded dragon species. It was summoned using Letitia's body and the Ophiuchus constellation's sun as a medium. Regardless of its nature, it did not have divinity in it. Therefore, the Heavenlock, Enkidu, was really just a restriction on the level of a thread wrapped around a dragon's body. It could be completely broken free in an instant. If Noah hadn't interfered, then, it was unknown when Noah had cancelled the giant dragon's relic. He flew down from the sky and landed on the giant dragon's body. He grabbed one of the Enkidu relic's chains. Pung! The divine power that surged around Noah's body turned into crimson waves of air. It was as if a crimson dragon that was only 2 meters tall and had green jade-like gems overlapped on Noah's body, setting off a gust of air. It was the Dragon Emperor's incarnation. Boost 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 boost. The green gems on the crimson dragon phantom that overlapped with Noah's body flickered and spoke in a steady voice. Transfer. At a certain moment, the voice on the jade changed. The power that had multiplied countless times passed through Noah's hand that was holding onto the Enkidu relic. It was like a surging source of power that was being poured into the Enkidu relic. Wang! The flowing light on the Enkidu relic suddenly increased, causing a resplendent golden light to illuminate the entire world. It also illuminated every space in the surroundings. It was only during this period of time that the Enkidu's heavenly lock, which could only exert an extraordinary binding power on targets with divinity, had its hardness increased to an unimaginable level under the effect of the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear. Only at this moment did the giant dragon seem to have reacted. It began to struggle frantically. Roar, 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 roar. Violent roars accompanied the giant dragon's struggle, constantly reverberating in the air. However, at this moment, it was already too late to struggle. After being multiplied by the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear countless times, the Enkidu relic's hardness had reached a level where it could restrain the giant dragon. Thus, no matter how the giant dragon struggled, the chains that were not even as thick as a single strand of hair to the giant dragon were like maggots in a tarsal bone. They firmly bound the giant dragon's body, firmly trapping it. Roar, 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 roar. The valiant binding power caused the giant dragon, who was unable to break free, to let out a frantic roar. It began to struggle even more desperately. Under such a chaotic struggle, the earth shook continuously, causing ghastly fissures to rapidly expand. If the giant dragon was allowed to struggle wildly like this, then this piece of land would definitely become a barren land. Noah, who was holding on to the Enkidu relic, tried his best to stabilize his body under the giant dragon's struggle. A fierce light appeared in his eyes as he clenched his free hand into a fist and raised it high. Pung! The fist that carried a huge force directly bombarded the giant dragon's body, solidly landing on the giant dragon's huge body. Roar, 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 roar. The giant dragon's painful roar resounded. Although it did not have the terrifying strength of the giant transformation, the Dragon Emperor transformation still had the dragon kill ability to cause great damage to dragon-type creatures. As a pure-blooded dragon species, the giant dragon seemed to have been seriously injured by the dragon kill ability of the Dragon Emperor transformation. Even if there were no external injuries, the internal injuries caused by this attack should have accumulated. Clearly aware of this, Noah had just raised his fist and was about to strike a second time when he suddenly remembered that the giant dragon was actually Letitia. He then dispelled the thought of continuing to attack. Then, Noah pulled out the small silver sword from his waist. In Noah's body, the energy source that was originally filled with divine power suddenly changed. Half of it turned into divine power and was imbued into the small silver sword in Noah's hand. Clang! The highest-grade elven magic device named Demon Slayer bloomed in a brilliant white light and was tightly held in Noah's hand. Closing his eyes, Noah confirmed with his contracted elf in his mind. Aster, can you break the connection between Letitia and the giant dragon? The giant dragon was summoned by Letitia using herself as a medium and the sun's sovereign of the Ophiuchus constellation. Since Letitia herself was used as a medium, there must be some kind of contractual power that connected Letitia and the giant dragon. If this was the case, then with Aster's resistance to curses that could even break contracts, he should be able to break this connection. At that time, the giant dragon's summoning would be ineffective and Letitia would be released. Aster's voice, who understood what Noah wanted to do, sounded in his mind. Although I can break it, Letitia, in addition to using herself as a medium, also used the power of the sun's sovereign to summon a pure-blooded dragon. With my power, it might not be enough. No problem, this is also within my expectations. Noah tightly held the holy sword that was flickering with a brilliant white light. As long as it can be broken, if the power is not enough, let me multiply it. After saying this, the other half of the divine power in Noah's energy source surged. Boost, 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 boost. The violent power poured into the silver holy sword. Transfer. The silver holy sword blossomed with a brilliant white light that illuminated the heaven and earth. Pucci. The silver holy sword that carried that astonishing white light pierced straight down and pierced through the giant dragon's body. Chapter 1366. The sky gradually brightened up. The thick layer of dark clouds that filled the entire sky slowly dissipated at some point, allowing the clear sky to return to this world. The sunlight illuminated the ruined flame capital, making it seem as though it was shrouded in a layer of golden gauze. It was exceptionally dazzling. That scene made people think of the dawn after the storm and couldn't help but feel that there was still hope in the world. Taking a closer look, in the distant sky, Vampire's ancient castle was still floating there without the slightest movement. As for the inside of Raging Flame Capital, the bodies of the giants were everywhere, and the ground was dyed with blood. Pterosaurs, fire dragons in human form, and fire lizards in lizard form were cleaning up the mess in every corner of Blazing Flame Capital. They were also carrying the injured people away on stretchers. They looked very busy. His Highness, who was overlooking the scene in Flame Capital from a cliff, was covered in bandages. Even half of his face was bandaged. After a while, he gradually closed his golden eyes. Looks like that guy really defeated the strongest kind of giant dragon. It had only been 3 hours since the dragon had disappeared into the sky. Before that, the severely injured His Highness was rescued by Bel from Noah's hands. Bel used the greatest healing power to heal him, but this was the extent of his recovery. One could imagine how terrifying Noah's fist was when he was in a rage. Especially after using the Dragon Emperor's incarnation, the punch directly hit His Highness into a seriously injured state. If Bel didn't rescue His Highness from Noah's hands in time, perhaps Noah only needed to add another punch to kill His Highness. His Highness felt a little ironic. I thought that even if my strength wasn't as good as his, I wouldn't lose with my trump card even if I couldn't win. I didn't expect that I wouldn't even have the chance to use my trump card. Or rather, it was because Noah considered that His Highness might still have a trump card that could be comparable to authority, that he used the Phoenix incarnation at the first moment in a state of rage. His purpose was to completely defeat His Highness before His Highness could use his trump card at a speed that was incomprehensible to human intelligence. In fact, His Highness didn't even have the power to resist due to the speed of authority. He was severely injured by Noah in 2 to 3 moves. In the end, His Highness didn't even have the chance to use his trump card and was defeated. Since I was born, this is the first time I lost so badly, right? His Highness looked in the direction of Glorious Flames City as if he could see the man who had the same background but had a different fate. He muttered to himself. However, this miserable situation won't last forever, I promise. As soon as his voice fell, a spatial fluctuation began to spread behind His Highness. In the spatial fluctuation, several figures slowly appeared. There were a total of 3 people who appeared. One was a phantom beast with a pitch-black fur and a single horn. His upper body was that of a vulture and his lower body was that of a lion. His race was known as the Griffin. One was a witch wearing a strange robe that only exposed the lower half of her face, holding a harp in her hand. The other was a man wearing a gorgeous coat with a contrast of red and blue, dressed like a clown. The 3 figures appeared behind His Highness. Looking at His Highness who was wrapped in bandages, they had different reactions. The pitch-black griffin was surprised. The witch in the robe was shocked. The clown-like man raised his eyebrows. The 3's reactions completely expressed their impressions of His Highness. The first one doubted the reality of the scene in front of him. The second one felt that it was inconceivable. As for the third one, he was simply gloating. His Highness didn't seem to notice the 3's reactions, or perhaps it should be said that he guessed their reactions. He didn't even turn his head and leisurely greeted them. Gerald, Aurora, Maxwell, are you guys back? These 3 names corresponded to the Griffin, the Witch, and the Clown. Your Highness? The Witch, called Aurora by His Highness, said hesitantly. Your injury, don't mind it. His Highness waved his hand that wasn't wrapped in bandages. I just met an unexpected, interesting, and powerful opponent. Opponent? The Griffin, called Elder Gu by His Highness, spat out a powerful voice. Is there anyone here who can be considered an opponent by His Highness? Perhaps, the other party doesn't even consider me as an opponent. His Highness sighed, smiled bitterly, and said this with a little indifference. Then, he returned to his casual appearance and turned his head. Since you're here, it means that the results of the attacks in the east and south are out, right? His words made Elder Gu and Aurora's faces stiffen. They were speechless. Seeing this scene, His Highness understood. I see, the attacks failed. This time, the people in charge of attacking the east, south, and north areas were all people here. Among them, His Highness and Belle were in charge of attacking the north area. Elder Gu and Aurora were in charge of attacking the south area. The man called Maxwell was in charge of attacking the east area. Of course, other than the people here, each group had a few other demon kings as the vanguard. From the looks of it, all the demon kings in the vanguard had been dealt with. It's fine if it's the south area. After all, that's that guy's community. No Name, who doesn't have a flag or a name, went as well. There are a few talents there, so it's not surprising that they were repelled. His Highness turned his gaze to Maxwell. However, the east area has an army of avatars from the final trial attacking it, but they still failed. Isn't that a little unreasonable? Hearing this, Maxwell was different from the other two. He had no respect for His Highness at all and said this casually. That can't be helped, Your Highness. That White Knight King returned the divine spark to Buddhism and completely released the power of the seal. The first generation of the three-headed dragon's avatars was almost annihilated in an instant. The remaining ones are just small fries. It's only a matter of time before they are destroyed, right? What? Elder Gu and Aurora's expressions changed drastically. The White Knight King returned the divine spark to Buddhism. I see, has the White Knight King returned? His Highness's expression also changed slightly, and then he snorted lightly. If that's the case, then there's really no other way. At this moment, Ling's figure flashed out beside His Highness and appeared in front of everyone. Your Highness. Ling directly looked at His Highness and spoke with a heavy expression. The giant dragon has indeed been defeated. The reason why Ling wasn't by His Highness' side was to go to the capital of Raging Flames to gather information. As soon as she returned, Ling brought back such news that His Highness had expected. They really defeated the strongest species? His Highness closed his eyes. Then, what happened to the seal? His Highness's words made the atmosphere of the entire space extremely heavy. Under such circumstances, Ling spoke with a gloomy expression. Although it's just a preliminary guess, I think that the seal hasn't been broken yet, but it should have woken up. This sentence made the heavy atmosphere even thicker. Is that so? His Highness murmured. Has it finally woken up? Now, what should we do? The indecent smile on Maxwell's face also slowly disappeared, but his attitude was still extremely frivolous and casual compared to the others. According to the original plan, we must eliminate all the class rulers and their substitutes, then find a way to become the class ruler with full power and obtain the sovereignty of the sun. Now, the plan has undoubtedly failed, so we must enter the next stage, right? One of the mediums to seal it is the sovereignty of the sun. His Highness opened his eyes, and there was an indescribable expression in his eyes. So, our next plan has been decided. His Highness looked around at everyone. Remove the seal of the oldest demon king. Chapter 1367. Box 54545 Outer Sect, Blazing Flame City. In her sleep, Letitia's consciousness gradually began to awaken. The moment she woke up, Letitia clearly felt it. She felt a sense of fullness. It was as if something that she had lost was found. It was a sense of fullness that filled her entire body. This sense of fullness was something that Letitia had not felt for a very long time. Ever since she lost her divinity, even the dragon's shadow had become incomplete. Letitia could only feel a sense of emptiness, as if she had lost something. It had been a long time since she had felt such a sense of fullness. Accompanying this sense of fullness was a sense of power surging through Letitia's body. Sensing this sense of power and fullness, Letitia immediately understood. The divine spark that she had completely lost had returned. No, it was not only the divine spark. Even the gift of the dragon's shadow had been completed. There was no longer anything missing. In other words, at this very moment, Letitia had finally obtained back the 4-digit amount of power that she had lost. The one who had once become the ruler of the entire hierarchy, the one who led the entire vampire race, the one who protected the order of the Box Court, the one who was still known as Dracula even after his fall, had finally returned at this moment. Right now, Letitia had absolute confidence. As long as she relied on this power that she had regained from her peak, then even if she had to reverse the 16 knights in no name, Letitia would still have the qualifications to fight and even obtain victory. But, why would the divine spark return? Why would the originally incomplete gift be completed? Letitia's hazy consciousness caused such a question to appear in her mind. However, as Letitia's consciousness gradually awakened, she gradually obtained an answer to this question. Recalling everything that happened before she lost consciousness, Letitia immediately shivered. Her consciousness instantly sobered up and her eyes abruptly opened. When she opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was an unfamiliar room. Immediately afterward, a familiar voice entered Letitia's ears. "You've finally woken up?" Hearing this voice, Letitia subconsciously turned her head and looked to the side. Beside the bed that Letitia was lying on was Pest, who was wearing a blue and white maid outfit. She was looking at Letitia with a listless expression. "You slept a little too long, purebred Miss Vampire Princess." Pest. Letitia couldn't help but hold her head. What's wrong with me? What's wrong? Did you forget?" Pest explained with a bored expression on her face. "Have you forgotten that you've become a demon king again?" "No, I still remember this matter very clearly. Furthermore, I also remember that Master found the shadow of my consciousness in the vampire's castle." Letitia tried her best to recall this matter. "Then, I had a little chat with Master. After that, Master left. Not long after, my consciousness was suddenly cut off." "Of course it will be interrupted," Pest said in an annoyed manner. "That's because that guy cut off the connection between you and the dragon. Furthermore, he separated you from the dragon's body. Thus, your consciousness in the illusion immediately dissipated. After that, you fainted." "Master separated me from the dragon's body?" Letitia looked at Pest with an astonished expression. Then what about my game? Is there even a need to ask?" Pest said matter-of-factly. "Of course it was solved. That day, Noah used his Dragon Emperor incarnation's multiplier ability to increase the power of the Demon Slayer to its limits. Then, he used the Demon Slayer to pierce through the dragon's body. After being pierced through by the Demon Slayer that had multiplied its power countless times, using Letitia's body as a medium and borrowing the power of the son of Ophiuchus constellation to summon the dragon, the connection between the dragon and the medium was directly severed. Amidst world-shaking roars, the dragon gradually disappeared. After that, Letitia, who was wearing a pitch-black dress, slowly appeared at the location where the dragon disappeared. She had fallen into an unconscious state. After that, Letitia's game was broken. After all, the dragon was a pure-blooded dragon species that was summoned using Letitia's body as a medium and borrowing the power of the son of Ophiuchus constellation. The disappearance of Letitia's dragon was also seen as the death of Letitia, the leader of the game. As a result, the game was broken, and Letitia was released from her position as the Demon Queen. "Is that so?" Letitia couldn't help but hold on to her chest as she muttered, "Is that so? No wonder I could feel the affiliation contract in my body getting stronger from the start." The defeated Demon King would become the subordinate of the victor. This was one of the laws of the box. In the past, in the game of bestowment with Luos, Noah openly obtained Letitia's authority and established a subordinate contract with her. And now, after the experience of defeating the Demon King, the contract between Noah and Letitia became even stronger. With the two added together, it was likely that the strength of the contract in Letitia's body had reached a terrifying level. Originally, after establishing a subordinate contract, if the controlled party's strength was stronger than the controlling party, the controlled party would be able to resist the controlling party to a certain extent and weaken the controlling party's strength. Now, even if Letitia became stronger than Noah, she wouldn't be able to resist Noah's command, right? With this, I have truly become his possession. Sensing the extremely strong contract in her body, Letitia couldn't help but reveal a very beautiful smile. My master is truly an extraordinary individual.